Okay. So hold on.
Fiscal year 2013. I'm Alex Whiteside, the chairman, and with me are
Emily Ennis, member.
Ed Duffy.
Michael Kelly, member.
Bill Clark, Planning Director.
Jean Peterson, clerk.
Mr. Lynch is not going to be here tonight. The first thing on our agenda is to approve the minutes of July 12th. And I think they look pretty good. I think they look perfect.
Hold on a second.
Now, you had a few changes from the ones in the packet. Do you remember what those were? We don't have a red line.
I don't have any idea what they were.
Gee,
They
were
brought it to perfection.
substantial, or were they mostly typos?
I have no corrections.
Changes of words type of thing.
Okay,
Alex, I have no
Couple of
changes.
eliminated sentences.
fair
Okay,
enough.
all right. So is that the same as a motion to approve these things?
Yes.
Okay, and Ed, when you say you have, that's a second?
No, yeah, second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
No changes.
The 12th has been approved. The 26th, we're going to wait on a little bit until our next meeting, which leads us right into our next meeting, which seems to be scheduled on August 23rd for some reason. Any reason we're not meeting? Oh, it is early in August, isn't it? Okay. August 23rd it is. And then the 13th and 27th of September, all here in the Carol Blute Conference Room. Now, we're going to do a scenic road hearing. No, we're not going to do a scenic road hearing. We're going to hear the town planner's report.
Why aren't we doing a scenic road hearing?
It's-
6:35.
Isn't there a continuance requested?
No,
Oh.
continuance until the 9th of August, and that's
Ah,
today.
all right, and it is the 9th of August.
Yes.
I'm there. I'm here on August 9th. Who wants to talk about the lot number 1 Bradley Road
Good evening, Mr.
situation?
Chairman. I'm going to,
Introduce yourself for the record, of course, and for the, please note that this meeting is not only being taped, but it's being broadcast, so
Until
until
we switch over to
Until 8,
selectmen.
yes.
Yes.
But it will still be taped after 8 o'clock, so be advised.
thank you very much. Edward Corcoran, attorney representing the owner of the property at 1 Bradley Road, and joined by Jim DeSalle, who is the developer of the property at 1 Bradley Road. I would beg the board's indulgence. One of the abutters, this is a matter that was heard under a special permit application for a single-family residence by the Board of Appeals. After 3 nights of hearing and a number of other meetings, the board granted the special permit with conditions. One of the abutters emailed me this morning and asked what time is the hearing tonight, and I said 6:45. And,
45.
and that abutter is not here yet. There are a couple of other abutters who are here, so I am happy to hold until 6:45 unless the board at its pleasure would like to go forward.
Well,
I know that creates a little bit of,
why don't you tell us about this, this particular issue? What
it's
do you want to do to the scenic road?
simply creating a driveway opening, and an opening where there's currently an opening on a plan, or in the stone wall. It's in accordance with a plan that was approved by the Board of Appeals, and prepared by Mr. DeSalle. This is a It's an interesting matter. This is a lot that was part of a 1967-68 subdivision. Originally laid out as 40,041 square feet of record. When the current owner sought a building permit from the town, his engineer at the time plugged the coordinates into the computer and it came out at 39,959 square feet, 41 square feet shy of a buildable, of a conforming lot in a Residence A zone. The non-conformity is about the size of this table. But we applied for a special permit under the zoning bylaw, which allows for the last lot in the subdivision to be approved for single-family residence if there is at least 32,000 square feet and 150 feet of frontage. And we met both of those requirements. The Board of Appeals granted the variance this spring. There was no appeal.
Special permit.
Special permit. Special permit, not a variance. We applied for both, but they granted special permit. The permit was granted, and what we're here tonight is simply to review the application for the driveway access to Bradley Road, which is a part of the scenic road in Milton.
And apparently, we've all gotten copies of the plan. I remember getting copies of the plan. Of course, I didn't bring the copy.
I can put it on the wall if you want.
That'd be great, because I can't find my copy either.
And I apologize, we did not bring separate copies to the meeting.
You don't have to apologize.
Just because our filing systems are out of whack.
Well, normally it's something that I like to do to make sure that the board has everything it needs. And I noticed that the abutter who emailed me this morning has arrived, so
All right. Well, show us the,
First day with the new projector.
So,
Actually, I'm going to interrupt you for a minute.
sure.
The issue here is the property line,
Just the
Yeah.
here's the street,
Yeah.
here's the roadway, this is the town's right-of-way in here. There's a gate here and a gate here. I'll flip over and show you the picture of the gate. The reason they're here is because this is the apron for the driveway, which goes across the town's right-of-way coming in here. Anytime you do pavement in the town's right-of-way on a scenic road, they have to file for the scenic road application.
So how much pavement do they want, 12 feet?
It's
Right.
about 12 by 15. It's like 12 by 12.
12 by 12.
Yeah, approximate.
Okay.
No trees there?
This is Bradley Road, and Brush Hill Road is here. It's a corner lot, Brush Hill and Bradley. And it is the last of several lots that were part of a subdivision that go down Bradley by 3 lots and a separate lot here. And this was the last remaining lot.
There's the opening in the fence already, in the wall already. So what we're talking about is adding the asphalt down in this area here.
No trees.
Better put the house in here.
No trees.
No trees?
No trees. No trees.
Okay. Any questions from the board? Attorney with the lead comment. You can turn that off, I think. So who wants to be heard either in support or against this application? Anyone? Yes.
Hi.
You will come forward and take Mr. DeSelle's seat and introduce yourself. And
Excuse me. Hi, I'm Jill Menino. I live next door, 20 Bradley Road. And I could be, I have no problem with the entrance on the scenic road portion. I have one driveway-related issue, which we have spoken about, or my husband spoke to you about, which is we have a sewer easement that you'll see on the plan that goes right across where their driveway is going to enter. And I would just hope that any access would be contingent upon us coming to an agreement of how that's going to work. That's my concern. I just have a concern over the portion of the driveway.
They're going to
that goes
pave
across.
over your sewer
They're
easement?
paving over my sewer easement. So I would think we'd have to come to some sort of an agreement before that could take place.
When the Meninos purchased their lot, which was purchased prior to this lot, the owner granted an easement across the corner of the lot to provide, so they could have access to sewer.
Right.
And obviously, we'll be coordinating with them on how the access gets constructed. We're negotiating with them about tying into their sewer, so it's a common tie-in to the town sewer.
Right, and if you have a problem, you'll go to the town's DPW for the wisdom of Solomon, I assume.
Yeah, so my concern is just blanket
All right.
access
Well,
over
you've
my,
got- you're
my,
committed to be reasonable. And then we do have the DPW, which can probably resolve, if you get to an impasse,
Okay.
can resolve it.
okay, thank you.
Who else? Anyone? All right, so, does the board think that this is approvable? And if so, we'll accept that as a motion, Ed, and a second, Emily, and all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. So
Thank you very much.
well, thank you for doing it in just the right amount of time. Now, the next item has to do with an open space development. No, 35 Hillside Street.
Too many hillsides.
Okay, the McCarthy Scenic Road situation. Well,
They're not here.
Maybe time for the town planner's report after all.
well, I've seen it's not a bad application because the site is not a pretty picture. So we'll see if the McCarthys arrive, and if they do, who knows? We'll fit them in. I suppose that they're going to produce some documents for us, aren't they? They're going to give us a plan.
Yeah, I thought we were missing some information. in our
They're
last
going to give us
discussion.
additional information, so we can't proceed without them. Looks like the town
I
planner.
actually have their plans.
Yeah,
Again,
and,
I can give it to you on the screen.
Okay.
What we have here is, as with every plan, we ask that every homeowner come in with a stamped plan. Their plan came in, it is stamped, and what it does is it goes back to this point. You take a measure from the garage to here. The issue is one of, this doesn't actually fit on our assessor plan. We took the assessor plan, and it's bigger than 65 feet from the edge of the garage. So 65 feet comes back to here. It is staked out on the ground. That goes from here across. This is the town's right-of-way, including down here. So the entirety of that wall is in the town's right-of-way. The proponents are talking about taking the wall, building the wall up, and then filling behind the wall. Right now, there's a lot of scrub, a lot of brush. and they're leaving the trees that have the tags on, the blue flags on them. They did commit to plantings, and the plantings that they're going to do are, here's their plantings, they're talking about rhododendrons, forsythias, viburnum, winterberry, hydrangea, a red maple, a dogwood, and the rest is what goes around the tree itself.
Do we know where they are?
We do not have a planting plan. We just know that it's within that front yard.
And we asked about the wells around the trees.
The existing trees will have to be saved and wells will be put around those. The proponents are the Thomases are putting these things in. A. Thomas and Sons is the contractor for the project. They did not draw a plan, they just gave us a planting list.
Bill, can you shrink that down so we can see all the plan at once? Can you, I don't know, we've got it on 78%. Yeah, just shrink it down to something like 50 so we can just see the whole thing.
This is the wall on the Copeland side of the street. Here's the other wall. Here's their property line where the 150 is.
Mm-hmm.
The area we're talking about is this area right in here. There's 19 feet in here. And this is the area that we're talking about. They're talking about rebuilding this wall across here. They're taking out everything except that one tree that's right here that belongs to the town, and the DPW has that tree as a hazard. It will be down shortly. Is that giving you what you asked for?
Yes, it's perfect, thank you.
Questions?
Question.
Mr. Duffy?
Seems to me, Bill, going back, way back, that Hillside Street was a county layout. I think I might still be under their jurisdiction. You know, there's quite a few Hillside Street cases we're gonna be talking about, but I think it's worth investigating.
Doing,
I think that's not town land we're looking at, it's county land. It might be worth looking into.
Oh, you're saying it's a county road,
It's a county
so
road.
it may be county land.
That's what I'm saying, it's worth looking into, because we have other applications on Hillside Street. Maybe we can find out in the morning.
Mr. Whiteside, who owns your front yard?
That's, Mr. Duffy raised an interesting issue. If it is a county road, presumably the county owns it. And that this would be work on county land, if the county owns it.
I'm sorry to throw a monkey wrench into it, but
How about if we do this two ways? Since the county commissioner lives across the street from me, I will have him take and look into it directly for us. If you are satisfied with having them replant that area, rebuild the wall, if it belongs to the town of Milton, and if it's county, then I'll have to go back and deal with Mr. Collins and have him, he can get me an answer a whole lot quicker than I'm going to find one.
we may have care cuts in control, and maybe that's enough. I think
I'll have Mr. Collins check on it
yeah,
and,
they're the only engineering department, could be, give us an answer quickly.
right,
Yeah.
if I have him call, they'll give him an answer tomorrow.
Yeah,
I think that sounds reasonable.
yeah.
All right, any other questions? What is the board's pleasure?
Does anybody wish to speak to it?
Does anyone wish to speak to it? That's a bit,
I thought that was a good question.
well, I mean, does the board have a pleasure about I think that we've seen enough. It isn't, it doesn't really tell us too much. And we do want those trees to be adequately
Protected,
welled.
yes.
And how are we going to ensure that that happens?
You're going to put that in your motion,
In the decision?
in your decision.
I suppose that we could do that. We
And
could
are we-
say that the tree warden has to approve, if the grade is raised, the tree warden has to approve the amount of the grade change as well as the protection of the existing trees.
Yep. And are we authorizing Bill on this and on the other one to send the letter?
I think
However
that
that-
we're authorizing me to send the
Yeah,
letter.
that's just fine too, right?
Just because it seems to me that we want to make sure that we touch the
Oh.
bases.
Fair enough.
We want the wall reconstructed in a traditional farm-like manner, but we don't require that you go and find stones in your backyard to put there.
What condition does the wall exist in today?
Terrible.
I mean, are there stones there to reconstruct it?
No, the stones are probably a foot high, and they're talking about bringing the wall up 3 feet, 4 feet,
3 feet?
3 to 4 feet tall.
It's gonna be a loose stone wall?
Yes.
It'll be
going to
just
be- it's going
stones
to be
piled
something-
on stones rather than,
Mortar?
It's going to be mortared on the inside, not on the outside.
Okay.
You stack you stack the stones, you mortar the middle, and as the stones are stacked in, they grab that way.
But it'll appear dry laid from the
Yes.
exterior. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, who wants to be heard on this application? Seeing no one,
I'll move that the board approve this request to rebuild the existing stone wall and remove and replant the vegetation in the town's right of way, provided that
Not
the trees are
trees.
sufficiently protected.
no trees.
No vegetation, it said vegetation.
A tree is not a vegetation.
I'm just reading what it says in there. And provided that the existing trees to remain are
Right.
protected.
And the landscaping is, meets the approval of the tree warden?
Fair enough.
Can we-
Well,
can we
we'll
ask
give
who's doing the-
We'll give the tree warden some reason to get out and inspect these things.
Who's doing the reconstruction of the wall itself?
140, Perfect Stone Company.
All right, we have a motion. I think it's seconded, is it not?
Second.
Do you have a question?
No, I have more information for Mr. Kelly. If you go by and you look at the house is stone, the roof is slate. It's the same stonework, same mason.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Now, we have the town planner's report.
I have been dealing with issues with the wind turbine. I've been dealing with issues with the rink, the concession for the rink. Been looking and working with the business entities down in the square for furthering more work down in the square from the money that was put up by the transportation bond. I met there today with Senator Joyce and Secretary Davies, the Secretary of Transportation, who took Jeff Mullen's job. We met down there this morning with people from the Chamber of Commerce, with Selectman Cohane. We visited a few other places in town. I think most of my work this week has been with issues for the Selectman's office, paperwork for the planning board, plans for the planning board, but most of the paperwork is stuff coming for the Selectman's office. Just because of some of those changes up there. I have been getting comments on the assisted living that are going back and forth. I think we got them all the ones that came to this board, from the developer for the Horseplay project, and another entity that is interested in putting in an assisted living. They're about 50% with what's here. They have some other issues with some of the components of it. That's about it.
But the draft
And I
zoning,
talked to-
you personally took up to the selectman's office and laid it on the counter
I-
and said,
I brought it in this afternoon. I put a cover sheet to it that specifically says that this article is brought forth by the planning board to be added as a subsection under section 3. It made it in there at 2:15 this afternoon. It will be presented, it's on their agenda for their acceptance tonight. I actually have to go there this evening and walk them through this one, through another zoning article, and a couple of other issues on their agenda.
well, we want a couple of short questions for the town planner now. Yes?
On the events today and on some of the paperwork you've been doing for the selectman's office, are any of those things that will be coming our way, or are they completely separate?
The issue of MassWorks, which is when Senator Joyce was here a couple of weeks ago, he talked about MassWorks. We could potentially use MassWorks. Planning board issues down in the Central Ave Business District. Is the potential to use MassWorks for the Ponce Valley Parkway, Brush Hill Road area. They're using MassWorks for the Parkway. That one won't come from here. That'll be DPW Engineering and DCR. Those are the only ones. I mean,
Okay, good.
it would be interesting to see how the MassWorks project is actually going to fit for the Central Ave Business District. If we can get a willing developer on that site, we can work with them to craft something that would then use that MassWorks money on that plaza area. But we need to see what comes in from Mr. Conley on the potential for creating that plaza.
Okay, now,
That's it.
on the Hillside Street, we're going to send out a letter, and you'll be set to go.
Okay.
So that'll be good. We look
You're all
forward to
set.
seeing it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.
Hope it's an improvement to the neighborhood.
Okay. Okay, now,
Thank you.
now we get to the open space development off Hillside Street. And this is an interesting case
Yes.
in that I have an interest in a 18-acre piece of land, which is not, it doesn't abut the Fandry land. It's across Ford Ranch Road and across the land of the people who live along Ford Ranch Road. I do abut Mrs. Chen, who is at the end of Ford Ranch Road. And the Ethics Commission has gone to the State Zoning Act that says a party in interest includes an abutter to an abutter within 300 feet of the property being developed. And the way I read this was that you would take the point where Mrs. Chen's land abutted my land and measure from that point to the nearest point on my land, and it's more than 400 feet. But the developer here also owns a lot on Ford Ranch Road. And if you start at their front line, which is right on Ford Ranch Road, and you go across the road and across the lot, across the road, the land in which I have an interest is within 300 feet. So even though I'm quite sure that the statute, when it says an abutter to an abutter within 300 feet, they're talking about where the abutment occurs and measuring from there to one's property. But here, if you go to an entirely different part of the property and measure, you could find that I was within 300 feet. And I don't think that that is the...
Do you want to show them what we're talking about?
Okay, that would be good. All right, this is, I think,
That's an Andrew.
that's them, that's me. So if you measure from here to here, it's less than 300 feet. Whereas Mrs. Chen, I abut Mrs. Chen here. And if you measure from here, it's more than 300 feet, it's 400 feet. But from here to here is less than 300 feet. And even though
There is one other space, and it's this piece here to this piece here.
which piece? This piece isn't mine.
This is the one you sold to Burgess, right?
This is the one I sold to these people.
These people?
And this went to Burgess. So this is not, I don't think that we've got a problem there. It's only up here.
Right here.
In any event, I'm told that if this application doesn't go well, there will be an appeal. And I think this is an appealable issue. It's arguable. And I see no reason to just throw an appellate issue on the table when I can continue to participate, although not as a member of the board. I'll go and take my seat in with the interested people, and we'll proceed from there. So I'm not going to participate as a member of the board in this particular matter, but I'm going to participate as a citizen.
So with you not participating as a member of the board, the next person in line to be chair would be the secretary. And I believe, Ed, you are the secretary.
You talked to Bill about this later.
I have not spoken to Bill. Alex sent me an email earlier today. So, Bill? Oh, Bill. Ed, would you like to?
Well,
Would you like to chair? You don't have to, but you're the next person in line.
I understand.
So,
Let's see what we can get. Okay, Bill, do you want to bring us up to date as best you can?
I actually think that maybe Mrs. McGetrick and Mr. Hannigan should. It's their project.
Okay. Marion, welcome.
thank you.
Mrs. Johnson. Yeah. Yes, at the end of the call.
If I may, Ed, Marion, I'm sure you've noticed that there are now only 3 of us at the table. This will be the first meeting, as far as we know, that Bernie, or the first portion of the hearing, as far as we know, that Bernie has missed for this. So once he watches the tape and certifies, he would be able to vote on it. But we only have 3 people able to vote
Is
tonight.
that correct?
I need
Yeah.
4.
I thought he missed another one.
Oh, did he? We thought he had it yet. We were trying to clarify that
Well,
this morning.
It can be determined, I mean,
Or
I might
not
be
this morning,
wrong.
sorry, right before the meeting is what I
I
meant.
thought that he had missed an earlier one, but I'm not sure. I'm really not sure.
Yeah, we aren't either,
Okay.
so.
But let's proceed and then see if there are implications. You'll have to work it out, I guess,
Okay.
after this.
So we have Mary McGettrick, the attorney, and Bob
Hannigan.
Hannigan as our engineer. So whenever you're ready, Mary.
Thank you. It's actually been quite a while since we were here before you to discuss this application. I believe June 14th was the last full discussion, and then we've had continuances since then. So we felt that it was very important to get back before the planning board, before we all forget almost everything that's been talked about. And I'm going to try to recap what has been discussed without being lengthy. And I don't know if I'm really going to, say all this, but I prepared a summary and I'm going to distribute it to the members of the board so that hopefully I won't have to dwell too long on each thing. But I went back, reviewed all of the testimony that we've heard, my own presentations, questions that have come from members of the public and from other attorneys, for neighbors. I looked at memoranda that I'd prepared for the board in response to questions. And I think a considerable amount of data has been generated at this point on this application. So I'm hopeful that we're getting near a point where the planning board will decide, it can reach a decision one way or the other. And I think in everyone's best interest, that probably should happen. This application didn't begin really with the first appearance before the planning board. It began in September 2011. That's when the Department of Environmental Protection received the NOI submission, and that began the Conservation Commission process. So we had hearings all last fall about this project, and there were several site walks as well. The property was first mapped by Carr Research Laboratories, and then we brought in an additional environmental consultant, Lenore White, and she reviewed all of the wetlands boundaries with the Conservation Commission and there was a number of small changes that were made to that map. And finally, the Conservation Commission voted the wetlands boundaries on January 13th, 2012. In addition, at that point, the Commission had requested and received what's called an alternatives analysis from Lenore White. This will be part of the application going forward with the Conservation Commission, but it's a very important issue for this application because it was her conclusions and the prior conclusions of Carr Research Laboratory that led the applicant to decide to apply for an open space development permit rather than to try to do a development by creating a road and going through access from Ford Ranch Road. The point of an alternatives analysis is really to show what could be done other than the route that's designated and to show that there isn't a better route than the one that's been chosen. So whatever environmental issues there are with the driveway route, what Ms. White had to show in her memo, and perhaps additional data will be required in the future, is that any alternative routes would be more damaging to the environment and would have greater cost and greater difficulty for the applicant. So the main issue in an alternatives analysis is the environmental impact for alternative routes. But an additional issue is the economic impact on the applicant. I believe this is an important point, that this is part of the DEP regulations, because a number of people have commented that the applicant's main purpose here in not wanting to come in from Ford Ranch Road is that he wants to avoid that the developer wants to avoid the additional cost of doing a bridge or whatever would be necessary to cover the stream. The advice that we have received, and Ms. White is a very well-qualified consultant, 20 years with DEP, wrote some of the regulations that we're dealing with here, was a hearings officer for DEP, and she's been in private consulting for about 6 years. The advice was that we would not get a permit to bring in a road from Ford Ranch because there is an alternative route, the driveway. That route is owned by the developer. The use of that driveway, of course, is shared. It's a right-of-way, and it's shared with everyone else who has a deeded right to use the right-of-way. And given those circumstances and the impact that she describes that would occur to the wetlands, was her conclusion that we would not get a permit. And based on that advice, we decided to approach the planning board with an open space application. Now, this is an application under a special permit provision in the Milton zoning bylaw. It's available. It has certain requirements and criteria. And we believe that we've met all of those requirements. And in addition to that, we think that in general, we've met the requirement for a special permit because our argument, and we've submitted a brief on this or a memo on this, is that there's no substantial detriment to the neighborhood in this application. And in fact, we've been able to point out a number of ways that we feel this application or this, using this route would benefit the neighborhood. In particular, there would be a new water line and new utility lines put in there. All of the lines under the roadway are private. They're owned by those who have a right to use, who have utilities going to their homes on this right-of-way. And their maintenance has to be paid for, and their replacement has to be paid for by those parties. In this case, a developer would replace all of those lines. The new water line will enable the installation of 2 fire hydrants, and there are no working fire hydrants on this driveway now. The fire chief thought that that was a very significant benefit to doing this project. So, I think we've repeated that a number of times. We talked about it in the first hearing, that our reason for taking this approach was that we believe we could not be permitted to come in from Ford Ranch Road. In the meantime, as we've gone through the hearing process, and even prior to the beginning of the hearings in April with the planning board, we did offer to meet with all of the abutters, and 2 of them, the McDonoughs and the Corlises, were courteous enough to meet with us. I think with the McDonoughs we may have had 2 meetings. And we discussed concerns, and we also discussed this issue of why can't you go in from Ford Ranch Road, and we tried to explain our position. There was also a concern with changes to the driveway, with keeping the width of the driveway narrow. There was a concern with whether there would be impact on plants and vegetation, and basically whether the appearance of the driveway would change so as to really change the way that this area looked. And we felt that it would not, that we could assure neighbors that it would not, but that really has been a difficult point throughout this discussion. What we have done is to propose a plan for a 12-foot driveway after getting feedback from the fire chief that a 12-foot driveway with appropriate pull-out areas would be safe and would provide good access for fire trucks. And we've proposed a driveway entrance width that's the minimum that we could have that would provide safe access for fire trucks. Now, the question of safe access is an issue right now, but of course, there's nothing that would require there be a change to provide it. But when you change the entrance to increase the width, and you have to alter about 3 or 4 feet of stone wall on one side to do that, and you'd probably relocate that, you are creating a safer entrance for fire trucks. That means they can get in quickly if there's a fire. That's a significant issue, and the fire chief really made a point of that when he was walking around on the site and talking to us. So it is a significant benefit. The second issue that relates to how we meet the general requirements for a special permit is the issue of, the driveway itself and what right, or the right-of-way, I should say, and who has rights to do what with this right-of-way. And so I did some research on Mass General laws and case law to see what rights people have, who have the right to use a right-of-way. And the owner, of course, would have the same sorts of rights. And according to the Massachusetts general laws, and I provided the citations in the memo I gave you, owners have a right to place utility lines under, they have a right to dig up a right-of-way. Not owners, excuse me, people who have a right to use the right-of-way and owners have a right to dig up the right-of-way and put utility lines under it. So any one of the people currently who have a right to use this right-of-way can dig it up and install new utility lines, or of course dig it up to repair the existing utility lines, and water pipes and so forth. So this aspect of the application, the fact that the right-of-way has to be excavated to install new pipes and new utility lines, is not, it isn't anything special to this application. It's something that all parties involved here really have a right to do anyway. It's not that it isn't an issue. It isn't that, you know, digging can't have an effect sometimes on vegetation and other things along the right-of-way, but it's something that can happen anyway, and it will happen because the pipes are very old here. They are eventually going to have to be replaced, and sooner rather than later. So after doing that research, I felt it was important, again, when I came back to you tonight, to emphasize that the work can be done anyway. It's not just work that would be done for this development. The other point is that, of course, I gave you another memorandum talking about what alternatives there might be for development here. And I disagree with comments that were made at a previous hearing that this isn't particularly persuasive to talk about what the alternatives are. I think in this case, this is an open space development. And the bylaw specifically says that the purpose of the bylaw is to preserve open space and to try to maintain the rural character of the neighborhood. And so you have to talk about what the alternatives might be, really, to make your case and to show that this application is better in those respects than other alternatives. And some of the ones I talked about were a subdivision. You have 15 acres of land. You could have considered, you know, certainly a good deal more houses than you would here with 3 houses. You could also conceivably do 2 A&R lots, but some of those lots might be, one of those might be between two existing homes, and this proposal doesn't put anything between the existing homes. In the course of looking at the possibility of A&R lots, well, let me just back up a little bit. In our early discussions with neighbors, one of the things we talked about was how nice it would be if someone would buy all this land and put it into conservation. And we all thought that would be great, including the developer. And it hasn't happened. Sometimes it does, but it hasn't happened in this case. Nobody's come forward who's wanted to buy all of the property and just put it into conservation. It would be an expensive purchase. But the developer was very open to selling for that purpose. And what he did do was he decided to advertise the property in May to see what kinds of buyers came out and discussed purchase with him. And they were all the way across the spectrum, from very undesirable developments to developments pretty much like the one that's being proposed here. And there was one buyer, as I've mentioned to you in previous hearings, I think, who was interested in purchasing a large lot, maybe 2 lots, and creating a really kind of rural home, a place where they could have a horse, something that really sounded good in terms of what this neighborhood is all about. So I have talked about that at hearings. I've also mentioned it to the 2 other attorneys, Mr. McArdle and Mr. Bobrowski, and I've urged them to call Mr. Hamilton and have their clients discuss if they're interested and capable of making any kind of purchase of the 3rd lot, which could make that deal happen, to talk to Mr. Hamilton. And for whatever reason, to date, that just hasn't happened. And that buyer may not be in the picture anymore. I guess the buyer isn't in the picture. I mean, that's what I'm told. I was not privy to any of those discussions, but that's the report I've gotten. However, because of the discussions we had about the potential for an A&R lot, what we did do and what we're bringing to you tonight is a somewhat, an amended plan. And what we did was we asked the engineer to study the lot configuration and to see whether it's possible to separate one A&R lot from the remainder of the parcel, so that you would still have 3 developable lots in the back that would comply with the open space permit bylaw. And you would have an A&R lot between the McDonoughs and the Corliss' property. The reason to do this is that it will make available either 1 or 2 lots that will be smaller, that could be purchased by neighbors if they wish to preserve their privacy and to be sure that it will never be intruded on, and to add that land to their own property. The reason we did this was to see if it was possible, and it appears to be possible. It appears that the 3 lots that remain in the back there without that front piece still comply. They're more than 4 acres. The total acreage is more than 10, buildable land is still more than 10 acres. And in every other respect, this plan, I think you have a small copy before you, is the same as the plan that we brought in that we've been talking about. So it's the same width driveway, it's the same driveway in the back. And it may offer something, certainly doesn't take the form of development away, doesn't change the access route, but it may offer the opportunity to provide greater privacy or protection to those 2 neighbors. We haven't had an opportunity to discuss this with either the McDonoughs or the Corlisses. This would be the first time, I think, that they would see this plan tonight. And all I can tell you is that if this plan were to be approved by the board, there is already a buyer willing to buy these lots to build houses. So there is a buyer ready and waiting. An agreement has been reached. Of course, it would be contingent, as these all are, on permit actually being issued by the board.
Excuse me,
planning board.
Marion, excuse me,
Yes.
for the 3 lots in the rear.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
So, by the way, if you're trying to use my memo, I'm not following it too well, but, the material I'm talking about is all in here, so I just want to make sure I got everything in here for you. Just to briefly address some issues that have been brought up in the course of the hearings in addition to this. I guess we had questions that were raised about, whether this, I think at the last hearing we had, Mr. Bobrowski brought in a case, Gifford v. Planning Board of Nantucket, and made a comparison and said, he thought this application was analogous. It was very similar. There was a difficult access, circuitous route, and in that case, the court decided that those lots in that Gifford v. Nantucket case would not be permitted to be A&R lots. Now, the facts of that case are that there were 45 lots created, and each lot was connected to the road by a narrow neck of land. In some cases, the narrow neck of land was only 7 feet wide. In some cases, it was a twisting, circuitous kind of route. And for those reasons, the court would not support the creation of A&R lots. Basically, they said access was so difficult as to be illusory, as to not really be access at all. And I would say, in response to that comment, that this is not at all like the case that you're looking at here. First of all, that case talked about driveway access to the road. The driveway access to the 3 lots here is going to be as direct as it possibly can be. It's certainly not going to be twisting or circuitous. The major driveway, which is, to think about this conceptually, the major driveway here is the road, in the sense that it provides frontage for each of these lots. That's what the open space development bylaw allows you to do. It allows you to use frontage on a driveway. There's no other way under our bylaws that you can do that, but you can do it under this provision as a special permit. And the major driveway itself, which I think is what Mr. Bobrowski was trying to talk about, again, it doesn't resemble in any way the access routes that are described in that Gifford case. And the court makes the point in that case that that's a really extreme way of getting around the subdivision control law when you create a plan like that for 45 lots with these narrow necks and some of them in very strange configurations. So, I think you have a memo about that for me, and you probably had it for about a month, but that was a response to that earlier question. I also provided the board with memoranda addressing some of the questions raised at previous hearings about whether our bylaw allows a common driveway. It does in this provision for an open space permit. It does not, as far as I can see, in any other part of our bylaw, provide for a common driveway. And to understand what that issue is all about, if we were doing a subdivision here and we wanted to use common driveways, it's my understanding anyway that you could get a subdivision approval, but you still have to comply with zoning. So the question Mr. Bobrowski was raising in that hearing was, he was saying our zoning bylaw doesn't allow for this. My answer is it does, but only in this one provision. He also talked about fire safety, and I again reiterated, in my memo to the board, talked about the fact that the fire chief had reviewed this and felt this was a good plan and would work and was sufficient to allow good access, safe access for fire trucks. And the other issue, which we've discussed from time to time and which was raised by Attorney Bobrowski, was the question of whether, he said, well, why don't you, he said, you should have to go and get a subdivision approval for this. And to respond to that, first of all, I went back and looked at what the board has done in these cases. We've had 3 other approvals, 2 of which have been built. And in those cases, what the board did was to write a permit that specified what the driveway needed to be like in order to be safe and reasonably direct as access to the lots. And those were special conditions in the permit. And then when they filed the permit decision and the plan, they filed it as an A&R plan at the Norfolk County Registry of Deeds. So that's how we've handled these. And that is, as long as the planning board is ensuring that access is adequate to the lots, then you should be able to use a special permit. It's an exception, basically, in terms of how it handles frontage. And I don't see why you would have to go through a subdivision application. It certainly hasn't been the practice here in Milton. So finally, you may have more questions about this proposed amendment to the plan, or the amendment to the plan. You did get a very brief letter tonight from, did you get a copy of a letter from a?
Mr. Hickey.
Yeah,
The
a
arborist.
certified arborist that, he actually looked at the property quite a while ago. The letter's kind of brief, in my opinion, but the gist of it, the important, significant statement that he makes in that letter is that he feels that because the surface of the driveway is very hard-packed and has been driven on for many years, that there isn't water, draining into the driveway at this point, and that he feels the hard-packed surface of the driveway is very similar to what a paved surface would be like. So he's responding to one part, I think, of the IBIS report that said if you paved the driveway, it would have a significant negative effect on the vegetation. And the other issue, which he doesn't, this was explained to me at the time, but he doesn't really articulate it, we may be able to get him to give us a little bit more information, was that also means that drainage is going to the sides of the road, which means that the root systems, which will always seek the water, where water is, will tend to go to the sides. That's not to say that anybody, in my opinion, can guarantee, exactly what the effect of digging up this road will be on bushes and trees. But the first point is, that's a right that those using the right-of-way have right now, and they have it extending to the full 30 feet of the right-of-way. We're talking about putting new utilities in a 12-foot width and doing it as carefully as possible. And secondly, as far as the paving goes, his opinion was the paving was not an issue in terms of harm to plants and vegetation. So you did finally get that letter today, and if you need more detail, we can certainly try to get it.
Marion,
Yes.
are you done?
That's it.
Thank
Yes.
you. We have some problems. First thing, Marion's letter to Alex, the chair.
Oh, that's a secondary problem. This is the more important one,
Well,
before you introduce any more evidence.
Please.
All right,
Hold on.
I'm just warning you.
Is available at the Bill Clark's office if anybody wants to.
Oh, and I have a few
What Marion
extra
just
copies.
recapped
actually.
will be available in Bill Clark's office.
Sorry.
Yeah,
But I have
okay.
3 copies here.
Oh.
It's nothing, there's
The-
very little that's new in this. It's really
Yeah.
just a rehash of what we've talked about. Thank you.
We have more problems.
Okay,
We're going to stop the hearing right now for this reason.
okay.
Bill informs me that Mr. Lynch, who's a member of this board, is on his second absent night on this matter, which disqualifies him further from participating in this, I know, it's a deflator, which disqualifies him from sitting on this hearing again. Alex being off the hearing because he's maybe in the butter, which could be determined later that he could come back, but we have to stop the hearing right now. I don't know when we can continue it until we get Mr. Alex Whiteside's status straightened out, and then we'd have 4 up here. And with four we can continue. With only 3 here, we have to stop it right now.
Ed?
Yes.
Bernie can actually, if we stop the public hearing now and he attends the next one, he'll just miss the recap, but he won't have missed the discussion. I believe he will be okay to continue if we don't have any public discussion. If we have public discussion, then it constitutes missing the hearing, and he would not be able to vote. He's missed 1, so he's still allowed to vote. If he misses a second, he will not be allowed to vote.
Well,
And we would
this is
have-
the second absentee tonight, right?
It will be if we continue the public hearing, yes. He's
Oh,
so far, he's missed the
I
recap.
get you.
But we haven't gone into any
So
public discussion.
Alex would stay out there, and Bernie would be number 4 up here.
If we stop the
We
public
stop it
hearing
right
now.
now. Okay.
And we apologize, we talked before the meeting started, when we first found out that Bernie wasn't going to be here. We didn't realize he'd been absent to 1 already. Bill was checking while Marion was speaking.
Is everybody clear about that, what is happening here? If we can't get Alex to come back, Bernie can come back, if he wants to. He may not want to, but if we have no public discussion, which we have not had any yet. The only thing I would say to, if the Corliss family is here, and if, I see Jim McDonough here. And the Jepson. I'm particularly interested with Corliss and McDonough because the property that could be available would be to their advantage. Jim, you know what I'm saying? So if, I'm going to ask Marion and Bob, if you want to meet out in the other room, because it's a good opportunity. Anybody from the Corlisses here? Okay.
Yeah, they're here.
If you want to talk with Bob and Marion in the other room, we will not have any other public discussion on this matter tonight. The hearing is over.
Okay,
Let's continue.
When
It'll
will
be
be the
continued.
continuation?
When would you like that?
Well, let's, we'll determine
give
that
it a
because,
date.
We
No,
have
you
to
have to
continue
give
to
him
a
a-
date and
Well, I
time.
think
Time.
we need to have a date.
Okay. You're
gonna get it.
Fortunately, we need to have some kind of date
You need
23rd?
a-
publicly
Can you
announced.
do the 23rd? What, sorry,
The problem is, there's one attorney who isn't here tonight, Mr. Bobrowski.
right.
And so I am available on the 23rd. I think Mr. McCardle is here.
And I'm here from Attorney Bobrowski's.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Okay.
Would you like to address whether, do you know if he's available at that date?
We can, either he or I will be available.
Okay, so it's possible for us, for me anyway, to do the 23rd.
the meeting is continued to August 23rd.
We need to give him a time, hold on.
Yeah.
Can't ask a question tonight.
Unfortunately, no. So, yes. 8 p.m.?
8 o'clock, 2 weeks from tonight, in this room. We're sorry about that. Can't help it.
Okay, thank you.
Here we go. And you can have.
It's a nice tough one.
You want to talk to her right now?
Is it planning board member or is it private citizen?
Either or. Because you're only
All right,
one.
Bob, I'll talk to you.
Oh, no, we're gonna continue to have
All right,
I
I'll
can
give it to you.
communicate with that later.
You can do that.
I mean, I'd like an answer to a question.
All right, where's the agenda?
I'm sorry, it's not. Elliott
Any
Street.
question, I'll get you an answer.
Okay.
Okay, 36 to 50 Elliott Street.
I'll email with you, Paul.
Yeah, that would probably make sense.
Okay, we're going to, this, yeah, that sounds good. We will go into recess.
Briefly, when we
Okay,
return,
now,
we'll be
but-
taped, but not
Right, but when-
broadcast.
But once you're all set, okay.
Are you going to seek clarifications on your case?
On my case, I will, I can, if I get an appraisal saying that I have no financial interest, which I don't, I can participate. It's just that an appraisal costs some dough and takes some time. And I don't think the town will pay for it. Oh, I tried to do that. I mean, I talked to the Ethics Commission, I talked to John Flynn. I asked Marion what her view was, and it was, you know, it wasn't, no one, well, it's one of these ambiguous things, and apparently it just hasn't ever come up before.
When you answer Barbara sent it to me, she mentioned that. It doesn't matter.
All right, Mr. Corcoran, you have, well,
Till Miss Ennis comes back.
you can, sure. Absolutely. All right. Mr. Corcoran is eager to tell us why he's here.
There you go.
Good evening, Edward Corcoran, an attorney based in Quincy and representing the Sullivan family and their combined entities here again for continuation of the site plan approval for the property at 36 and 50 Elliott Street, otherwise known as the Milton Hill House property. Since we were last before this board, we were back before the Board of Appeals on July 31st, and I'm proud to say that the Board of Appeals voted unanimously to grant all of the variances that we requested with respect to the development of the new building at the lot at 50 Elliott Street. And they voted it with the conditions that we had submitted to neighbors and abutters. They accepted all of those conditions, and they added 2 additional conditions. One is that it's subject to approval of drainage and stormwater by the town engineer, and we are still working through those matters. The engineers were out today taking some borings for soil samples with respect to the locations of drainage structures, one. And the second was that it's subject to approval of a landscape plan by the planning board. And so this evening I have with me Blair Hines, who is the landscape architect. Mr. Hines has presented previously as part of this overall presentations to the board, but he has an updated planting and landscape plan that mirrors the latest version of the building that the board saw 2 weeks ago. And so I would hand it over to Mr. Hines and ask him to describe what we have and ask board's consideration of it.
Can you spell your name, sir?
Hines, it's Hines.
Thank you.
Well, we've been here before, and the current plan is an elaboration of the plans that you've seen over the past several meetings. The overall purposes of the landscape plan are three. One is to establish a pleasant, setting for the residents. Secondly, to mitigate the impact of the development on the Milton Hill neighbors. And three, to establish a positive presence along Elliott Street. To start with the first one, as you've probably heard before when you've reviewed the architecture, the building has a front onto a parking area that's facing south. And the idea is to create a pleasant little courtyard with some benches and flowers and gardens that go along between the building and then the sidewalk as it faces the parking area for the residents to enjoy. The parking area has been graded into the embankment, and it has some trees and some ornamental grasses and so forth. So the idea is to create a reasonably attractive parking area, notwithstanding the fact that you have a lot of cars there. In terms of mitigating the impact of the development on the Milton Hill neighbors, there are really three major ways that that's being done. Firstly, we're protecting most of the existing woodland that lies between the existing Hill House and the Milton Hill neighborhood. And as anyone who lives in the neighborhood has pointed out, they're almost entirely, or they are entirely, deciduous trees. So although they do a very nice job at mitigating the scale and impact of the proposed development during the growing season in the winter, it would be rather, there is some ability to see through the deciduous trees towards the proposed building. What we were proposing to do is to develop an evergreen planting that's above the parking area, as you can see, and then extending up to, because the neighbors had also had some concerns about the presence and architectural character of the Hill House, and they wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to maybe do a little bit more mitigating of that impact at the same time. So again, it's the existing tree cover, it's proposed evergreen trees. And then also, very importantly, we graded the parking into the hillside there. So there's about a 4 to 4.5 foot high wall, so that when cars go into park, their headlights are going to be shining into the wall and not into the abutting neighbors. So we really feel very good about the fact that not only will the lights be shining into the wall, but the cars will be largely obscured below the wall. You'd only be seeing, if you're up there close, looking through maybe the tops of some of the cars. The third way that we have been trying to mitigate the impact of the development on the Milton Hill neighborhood, you probably heard a lot about from the architects in terms of the preserving of the Henry House and the development of a garage that's kind of compatible architecturally with it, so that there was a whole scaling down as you come or look down Morton Terrace. You have the residential buildings and then the Henry House and then this new proposed garage. The idea is to create some buildings of the same scale, and that they also do go a long way to screening what is otherwise a fairly large building, but from I think you saw a number of those different modeling that they prepared. So our work has just been to kind of add on to the effort some additional evergreen trees at the end of Morton Street, a fence for the purpose not only of screening, but also there was some concern in the neighborhood about blocking any kind of throwaway for people walking, up to the development and then into the Morton Terrace neighborhood. So again, there's the fences across there. It'll be an opaque fence. And I know you've heard before from Ned about the fire department and so forth, so I won't, go into that matter. But just to say that we had chosen plantings that would be compatible with the fire access, also compatible with the kind of impact of snow plowing. We chose some plants that are that can withstand a fair amount of salt, and if they've got an enormous amount of snow damage, they're plants that they're called bayberry. You may be familiar with them. They're a plant that grows often down by the seashore, and they have ability, as I said, to withstand salt. But also, if they get damaged, you can cut them down, and they just leap back up in 1 year. So we thought that they would be a very versatile and tough plant for that situation. And the third was to establish a positive presence along Elliott Street. And I think this is one that we've heard a number of different, comments from over a period of time. So the landscape plan along Elliott Street is probably the one aspect of the plan that has changed the most over the course of how many meetings have we had, Ned? Many.
Fair number.
Fair enough. And here, there was concern that was raised at previous meetings about what type of deciduous trees you could get between the existing granite wall and the building. And there are trees that have, if you're familiar with the term fastigiate means, it means it's a very vertical formatted tree that grows fairly narrow and very tall. And since the Elliott Street lies to the north of the building, we chose, red maples, which had the ability to, grow fairly well without a lot of direct sunlight. And then in addition to that, you've also heard in the past that the intention is to infill the various driveway cuts so that you have a uniform granite rubble wall along Elliott Street, and so that would, again, add kind of a nice edge to the street. Secondly, on top of the wall, as I said, there's trees. There's also a lot of shrubs being proposed between the several porches that are added not only for the residents but also to help break up the facade. And then importantly, one of the things that has changed over the course of the development has been the access for residents onto Elliott Street sidewalk. And our earlier plans had one access on the east side, and then there were some concerns about ADA access there because it's stairs that really didn't have it. And then there was also some concern about what was, going to be a utility, I don't want to call it driveway, it wasn't a driveway, it was really kind of like a walk or lane that went from the sidewalk up to for trash to be brought out. And the concern was that it looked a little bit, wouldn't be very appealing, let's just put it that way. And so what the architects did, which I think really made a huge difference, was to add a second set of stairs to have a kind of a porch-like structure that helped to step down the building. And then we created an ADA, it's actually just a sloped walkway, it's not an actual handicap ramp, which would both allow, people to come up and down, and that was also a way of kind of mitigating the impact of the area where the trash bins would be brought in and out. The walkway, the ADA walkway, also is going to be landscaped with a lot of shrubbery and perennials and ground covers, so we're really making a lot of that area, assuming that, at least some residents will spend some time walking up and down, with some benches to sit on and so forth. Lastly, just again to improve the impact of the project as from Elliott Street, particularly when you're driving to the west, I think you can see it on this illustration, is we propose to develop a grove of flowering trees that would stand up on the embankment, and again, they would help to step down the massing of the building, but also in both the spring when they'd be flowering and the fall when they have a nice fall color, that they would add a kind of a nice little element as you're kind of driving by. If there's any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Well, I see that on your plan there are notations of the various plantings, and I suppose they're all numbered.
Yes.
Where does the wall appear?
The wall appears, you mean the wall along Elliott Street?
No, I mean, where are the specs for the wall?
Well, that would be something that you do the specs for the wall when you do the construction documents. And the idea would be that it would be to salvage the stone during demolition, to stockpile it, and then the spec would basically call for the mason to
Well, put it together, but I mean, did the Board of Appeals say we want a wall built by masons, blah, blah, blah? Or, I mean, where does that appear, what the wall is going to be? I mean, that would appear to me to be part of the landscape plan.
No, it would be indeed, and, do we need a note on the plan that says the wall will be
I would think
rebuilt?
so.
That'd be fine.
I
No,
would
that's
think
absolutely
so.
not a problem. We'd be more than happy to add that note to.
I mean, it does seem to me that that's the sort of thing, the landscape plan.
No,
I mean,
absolutely.
assuming what the Board of Appeals may have meant and what it may say in its decision. I know that we suggested to the Board of Appeals that they give us site plan approval, and they gave us something different. And I will be interested to see their reasoning and just how tight a rein they kept on the building without asking the planning board to give site plan approval. Yes.
Do we have a written decision yet from the ZBA? Okay, I don't think we'd seen one. So you're not looking for any votes tonight because you haven't yet got the stormwater management.
No,
dealt
we
with,
will be
and you
asking
haven't.
for formal site plan approval. I think
Right.
that's in the purview of this board. It's not in the purview of the Board of Appeals. The Board of
So-
Appeals granted the variances in a special permit with conditions that were related to the conditions outlined on the plan.
So they want, in
plans.
addition to our regular site plan approval, they also want our approval of the landscape plan.
But the
Yes.
landscaping plan would be a part of site plan approval.
Right.
They're
That's
just double counting it, as it were.
Right,
So-
so I mean, this is, are you suggesting that you're here for our input rather than our blessing, our immediate blessing?
Well, I think that, the point that I think we're here to get some final comments such as yours to make sure that the plan is meeting your expectation and is documented.
Do
So I
we
think your
have the,
suggestion's a good one to
plan?
have a note about the
I
wall.
think so.
do we have the
We don't have a
plan?
copy of this, do we?
Yeah,
You have a copy of one that
All the
is
plans.
not colored, that I think I forwarded to you. I think was forwarded to you previously. If not, you will have it.
I think we had an older
Well,
one.
Mr. Duffy says a plan that's not colored is like a day without sunshine.
I was waiting for you to finish that.
Plan dated July 26th,
But this is updated to take into account.
which has been,
Yeah, this is updated, ma'am, to take into account the changing to the
Right.
architecture that has been
So we don't
ongoing
have-
during
You
the
don't have
last several
Yeah,
meetings.
no, that's
Okay.
normal.
And that primarily in the landscape had to do with, I mentioned, with the ADA access.
Okay. I think that if you could get us this updated plan, we can certainly give you some comment, give you the comments that you want.
Good.
Understanding that this will be all part of site
final
plan
site plan
approval.
approval. Right. We will submit that to you for your consideration for the final comments that you may have for the 23rd, and then,
I would think that we should give them comments on the 23rd.
I think that sounds reasonable. That'll be a
So
long
why
night,
don't
but
you
that's
come
okay.
back for comments? Or we could, we have to have, we need to block some time to make comments, Bill.
Can we get those comments in advance, so if there were, such as your comment about
We could-
noting on the plan about the wall, we
We'll
could have
we'll
those?
try, if we can, we
All
will.
right, because that
Yeah,
way
we
we
can
could
send them
address
to
them
Bill.
on the plan.
We can
Update.
email them to Ned,
That'd be great.
Or maybe Bill should collect them and send them to
or,
Ned.
or whatever, or maybe both of them.
Does it designate any place what the material will be for the wall?
Excuse me.
Does it designate any place in the plan?
No, I think that's what, we've been representing it as salvaging the existing granite that would be
Granite block.
block, and then, and it would say, provide additional, granite rubble, in keeping with that.
So the intent will be to put back a granite block?
Yes, exactly. And that's been the intent from day one here. We've never been saying anything other than that, but I think that should be noted on the plans, and it will be noted on the plans that you get probably tomorrow through Ned's office.
You actually have this plan. It was emailed to you, and
This plan,
Yes.
But we don't have a,
this LO2 plan.
the one that Mike has right here, that's been passed down to show you.
Good.
did you print it out? Smart you.
Ned, you're doing your work.
Okay, we might, you might
Yeah,
make
don't
it a
let me
little
match
bigger.
this. Oh, open by 17.
This is okay?
Yeah, just get your magnifying
I
glass out.
I suppose.
Or in my case, just take my glasses off.
All right, well, this is fine. Not for construction. I don't like that.
We never get construction
But it
plans.
doesn't matter. They're going to construct it the way it's shown on the plan.
I think that our insurance companies like the construction drawings to be a little bit more thorough than a plan like that. That's what.
All right, so we'll get that's somewhere in our email.
It is, and I'll send it, I actually just printed it now, and I'll have copies of this for you, send them out tomorrow.
Oh,
Sounds
okay.
good.
And again, any comments that can
Well,
come.
we
can
we
respond.
will,
Thank you.
we're going to do our best, because we like this project. And we want to do everything we can to make it as great as it probably is going to be.
I believe there may be some people here with comments.
Do people want to yes, come on up and comment. And we'll take these comments for, this is good. This will give them something to work on right away. I hope.
Well, my comments may be moot, and I'm not quite sure that I understand where we're at in the process, so maybe there can be, yes, but first of all, yes. My name is Ruth Hayden, and I live at 314 Elliott Street, and I'm a town meeting member, Precinct 2, and a member of the Columbine Cliff Neighborhood Association, and also the Central Ave Revitalization Committee. And tonight I'm here, though, speaking as a neighbor and a resident of Elliott Street, where I've lived for 18 years. But I have a whole prepared speech here that I'm feeling is out of date. But I'm going to do it anyway, since I wrote it.
Okay. A whole prepared speech.
Well, no, just one page, but
Oh, all right.
yes.
Fine.
Prepared comments.
Well, we look forward to hearing them.
Thank you. So anyway, I did want to make two comments. One was a general comment, and then the other is a comment on the proposed Milton Hill House. Generally speaking, the Columbine Cliff and the Milton Hill neighborhoods are currently dealing with two large proposed developments, both on Elliott Street. There is the Henry's Building and the proposed large apartment building on Elliott Street in front of the existing Hill House apartment. There is also the new mixed-use building located at 36 Central Avenue, the new office building at 17 Canton Avenue, and the restaurants at the Fallon Ambulance Building. The area is booming and there is excitement in the air. However, to the best of my knowledge, there has not been a comprehensive traffic study which shows the overall impact of these developments on the area. That being said, I would like to voice my concern for the proposed apartment building at 3650 Elliott Street, in front of the existing Hill House apartment. In my opinion, it is too large. It's larger than the existing apartment building up on the hill. The facade is flat, the open balconies are an eyesore, and can be found nowhere else in town. With the variances that were granted, the balconies will be only 6 feet from the sidewalk. Walking by the building, it will tower over the sidewalk 4 stories high. My question is, how did this happen, and how did it get by so fast? The Milton Village Central Avenue Revitalization Committee presented 11 recommendations, and only a few were addressed. This committee is chaired by John Zekowitz, a well-respected architect who has been helpful on many projects here in town. Unfortunately, he couldn't be here tonight. We had asked for a shadow study, which I don't believe was done, and I believe that we will be walking and driving in the shadow of this building, which is taller than what is proposed at the Henry's Building. Not to mention, this will sit up on a hill. This is a major historic point of entry for Milton. If you look across the river standing in the Shaw's parking lot, the building will stretch from the blue spruce tree along Elliott Street around the curve to the driveway of the Milton Hill House. It would be helpful if the developer could stake the perimeter so that we have an idea of just how large it will be. Also, I believe the developer needs to conduct a more thorough traffic study to incorporate side streets in a larger area. And lastly, I would like to suggest that the developer give something back to the town. Are there any public amenities that are associated with this development? Years ago, there was a proposed Baker Chocolate Walk that would stretch from Adams Street to Central Avenue. Maybe the developer could install this and improve the sidewalks. There should be installed period lighting, benches, and I'm glad to hear that some bushes will be put up. Also, the developer should update the facade of the existing Milton Hill House, which is sorely out of date. We need to make sure that we don't end up with a building on Elliott Street 10 years from now that looks like the existing Milton Hill House apartment building up on the hill. Thank you.
Well, where have you been?
So, yes, so anyway,
There was a,
I
you
just
know,
need
there was
some
a hearing
clarification.
at the Board of Appeals just recently.
yes,
I wonder if you were there.
I wasn't. But in any case,
But it's nice
some
that you, it's
clarification
interesting
about,
to hear those comments.
yes.
But it wasn't, those weren't the comments we heard when we had our hearing.
Well, actually, I would like to point out that all of those comments that I made tonight were in the Central Ave Revitalization Committee recommendations that we gave you, which I have right here. We had 11 recommendations.
Yeah.
And we gave them to the Board of Selectmen, we gave them to you,
Yeah.
we gave them to the zoning board.
We said to Mr. Corcoran, we want to make sure that all the conditions that the neighbors want are listed and
Well,
presented.
So this was our report. I mean, I am on the Central Ave Revitalization Committee, chaired by John, and we made this lengthy report that had 11 items on it and distributed it to all of the various boards. And it was basically, in my opinion, ignored. So, and everything that I just read tonight is in that report.
There are apparently there are going to be a series of conditions attached to this thing. And the board asked Mr. Corcoran to make sure that all the conditions that were out there were presented. And if all these were ignored, it would seem, Mr. Corcoran, that you didn't do that.
Well, because we read these at the Board of Selectmen meeting, we read them here at this meeting. I don't believe, I'm not sure if they were read at the Board of Appeals. So,
We did discuss them at this meeting. I mean, I have a copy of them right here.
Yeah,
I've got notes
yeah.
on them. We did discuss them at this meeting.
so anyway, yeah, so if you,
Well,
just for my own, I just
but
need
it
clarification
seems
about.
to me if these are conditions that should be brought to the Board of Appeals' attention, I don't know
Well, they
exactly
did
what
get
they
a
are.
they did get a copy of this.
It's right here. We should probably double check when we get the decision from the Board of Appeals
see
to
what
make
they've
sure
done
that they're
about this.
actually included. And if they weren't included, which of them fall under our purview versus theirs?
In site, I guess we do have site plan approval coming up.
Yes.
And we'll see what the Board of Appeals does with these things. And we can do quite a lot on site plan approval. And
If I may, to the other requests, I believe tonight, which I saw in emails from the Revitalization Committee, was to have the applicant stake out the location of the new building. And,
Stake the perimeter
Stake
out
the
so that,
perimeter, I believe, is that possible? Okay?
Yep.
All right. So that would be good before we meet next time, and we can have a chance to look at it.
all right, I think that you add interest to this process.
thank you.
Have you looked at those, and do they look like site plan approval
Some
type
of them,
things?
I believe some of them are site plan approval type things, as you put it.
All right, so we will keep an eye on this, Ned.
I'm happy to. We've responded to many of these conditions and as we've developed the plan. Some we don't believe are necessary. For example, the shadow study isn't necessary. We've acknowledged that it's
There will be shadows.
There will be shadows. We know,
And they will go
Shadows.
across Elliott Street
go
at
across Elliott
times,
Street.
at times. They'll probably reach the river.
they may reach the river, particularly on December 21st. And we acknowledge that. We don't need to do a a shadow study. We know that there's going to be shadow. And we are developing planting plans that address that. We've done a traffic study which was submitted to the board as part of the application for site plan approval.
Well, and I know that
What
we
we're
did.
not doing, and we won't do, is a traffic study that's going to identify all of the impacts of all of the developments in this area. It's beyond the reasonable scope of this project.
But with request to the shadow study, I think we did talk about that quite a bit in our revitalization committee meetings, and felt that it was felt that it was important in terms of the winter with ice on the road and the sidewalks and things like that, that it just needed to be taken into consideration and looked at. And with respect to the traffic study, I don't think that you have to do the whole entire area, but certainly side streets such as Morton Road, High Street, and that area.
We've
think that-
identified the impacts of this project with respect to traffic, taking into account the volumes that are projected with respect to the broader development. The
All
real
right.
issue on traffic,
Okay,
the restaurants.
okay, yes, bear in mind that we have our master planners waiting in line to present so that we can determine all these things in the way to which they should be determined.
Thank you. I'm Ellen Denoyer. I'm at 83 Capon Street in Milton. I just wanted to comment on the proposal. I primarily traverse this part of the street as a pedestrian, and I understand that the owners are committed to maintaining the sidewalk, which I think is obviously very important, as Ruth mentioned, with shadows in the winter, snow and ice. I would also like to request that as much as possible there be some relief along the sidewalk in the retaining wall. And what I mean by that, and I'm sorry, I had hoped to bring photographs, but there is practically from Central Avenue to Adams Street, more or less continuous retaining wall along Elliott Street. There's virtually no place where you can stand on the sidewalk and, for instance, have a conversation with someone who is standing on a property because of the grade change and because of the retaining wall. So as you walk along that sidewalk, almost the entire way, there's a wall next to you. What I would love to see is that wall carved out in one or two areas, create a little sitting area with some benches, some plantings, a little relief from that very monolithic wall. And I understand that you're not responsible for the entire length.
We've actually done that.
And where is that?
There.
Great.
There's a sitting area there, there's a carve-out relief here.
Right.
There's steps and relief here, and there's a sitting area here as part of the ramp.
So I see the breaks in the wall, and there are breaks already in terms of the driveways. And I understand, of course, you're not responsible for the entire length of the wall from, Central to Adams. I'd like to see them be a little more generous. For instance, on the left, I don't see a place where people can really sit.
Steps there.
Right, I mean, would there be, for instance, that area on the
Bench
left? Yeah, could there be benches?
I think I certainly think there's some space for it. I'm not sure if there's a constituency for it, but I don't really object to it in any way.
Okay.
They
great.
would be in the dark,
Not in
under the
June,
shadow.
not in June, it would be lovely, and it would have a view of the river. And I think if you build
I
it, they
guess
will
being
come.
in shadow in June is a good thing.
It is a good thing, especially July and August.
I think it would really enhance the property, and I think it would enhance the pedestrian experience. And I think that the project overall is a very good project. I would like to see just a little more
Okay,
thought
well, this is,
put into the pedestrian experience.
this is something that we will ask you to explore.
I
Benches.
think it's a fine thing.
Okay,
You've
let's
made
just,
some gestures.
I mean, if you have
take it
other
further.
suggestions, send them to Bill, or send them directly to Ned.
And one
Or
other.
send them to both,
One other
preferably.
comment is about drainage and how,
Which, I'm sorry?
drainage,
Right.
again, both in terms of snow, but also in terms of rain. Again, just making sure that that sidewalk is a good experience.
Right, you don't want it to be an ice-covered
Right.
sheet
And I
during
understand that's
the,
something that the owners have committed to.
okay, well, maybe they'll heat it.
Well, we're worried about the greenhouse gases on that one.
All right, thanks.
All right, thank you.
Continue to a time certain.
23rd, what's our time on the 23rd?
What
Can you
is
go
our
this
time?
please?
The, how long do you think Ed, how long do you think you need for your open space development?
You'll be chairing it on the 23rd as well? Unless we want to take turns.
No, we don't want to take turns.
Then I think that's, you're the man.
7 o'clock, you have the Henry's project. 8 o'clock, you have the Hill House project. I mean, the open space, Hillside
Hillside.
Street, sorry.
Okay, so you want to put them on at 9 o'clock? 8:30?
Let's do it 8:30.
8:30, because after all, we're just going to be discussing conditions. We could do it at 8:20, you probably could do it in 20 minutes, except that other hearing may, we'll see. Okay,
All right. Thank
did we
you.
give you, what did we say, Bill, 8:20 or 8:30?
I really hope you say 8:20, but you
Okay,
say
8:20 it is. But bring a book,
So the
man.
hillside, open space is gonna take 20 minutes?
We've got another subdivision coming.
What now?
Thank you. Thanks.
What? Okay, now we're going to hear from Brown Walker. And
Before we start, can
Brown
I,
Walker planners, and we're going to do a little bit of a song and dance beforehand. Go ahead.
a couple quick things very quickly. Just so you all know, we are obviously interviewing our 3 respondents tonight for the master plan. The other board members should know that I filed a disclosure today with town clerk. Sadly, I filed the wrong form, so I'll file the correct one tomorrow. But one of our respondents is a sub, along with us, to another lead firm for a proposal that we all submitted yesterday. So I don't feel it's a conflict of interest because I didn't choose the sub, and they have no bearing on any financial matter, but you should know that I filed the disclosure. And that's that. So-
Okay, give us a rundown of why we're here.
Fair enough. So as you all know, and for the people watching at home this weekend, we sent out an RFP for visioning services as the first stage in a potential comprehensive update of our master plan. We received 3 respondents, Brown Walker, Community Opportunities, and VHB. All 3 of them, and I went through the proposals, all 3 of them met all the technical proposals. And we are here tonight to listen to them make their presentations. And hopefully at the end of the night, or at the very latest, our next meeting on the 23rd, we will be able to choose a consultant and move forward with the process. The other thing we'll be discussing after the interviews will be the master plan committee, make our recommendations for those as well. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I think we can.
My feeling is we'll
Start.
probably do the selection at our next meeting.
Fair enough?
Members of the master plan committee?
No. We're
Selection.
going to choose our consultant, and we'll discuss the committee and see where we're going a little later.
Okay, sounds like a plan.
Exactly.
Okay, well, thanks for inviting us. I think we just need to get the projector running. We did bring a short presentation.
Bill?
PowerPoint.
Do you want me to take that over now, or are you?
We just need to lift the ceiling just a little.
Why don't you go ahead?
you very much for inviting us here tonight. We think that putting a planning team together that you're confident that will work together with you, that will effectively connect with your community in an open dialogue, and that will be both credible and responsive is a really important first step in your visioning process. So thank you for inviting us to do that and meet with us personally. I'm Sue Brown. This is Juliet Walker, and we are the firm's principals, the firm's staff, the firm's coffee makers. So be assured that we will be who you will contact, and we will be directly responsive to you throughout the process. Juliet and I each have over a decade of experience in planning, community planning. We're passionate about helping communities develop and grow in ways that are consistent with their values. Juliet's going to discuss our approach to this project in more detail, but I just want to give a brief introduction of our firm. And I do mean brief. We provide community planning services to communities throughout New England with a particular focus on Massachusetts. We're particularly proud of our pragmatic approach and our interest in making plans that are implementable, that you can take and work with immediately. And we also have an emphasis on community participation. We think that's very, very important. We think that the best way to learn is to listen, and so a big part of our project management is dealing with getting people to listen to each other, to effectively communicate with each other, whether it's through your community members, your boards talking and listening to each other, committee members, etc. So that's an important part of our project approach. Although we are a small firm, we have been the lead for 9 municipal master plans in the last 8 years. This is in addition to other area plans that we've done. Each of these that you can partially see, we have been involved with, and we've also provided support to one that's not there, which is in Sutton, Massachusetts. So now, that's just a brief introduction to us, but I know we have limited time, and I'm going to have Juliet outline how specifically we're going to approach this project with you, if selected.
So you all have our proposal. We wanted to just have an opportunity to go briefly over it, and I want to allow plenty of time for questions. So what we're going to talk about tonight is just quickly introduce what we see as the purpose of the project, which is as the first phase of your master plan, it's visioning and identifying some key issues, and basically setting the groundwork for your complete master plan. We're going to highlight how we'll work together with you to make this a successful process. And again, most importantly, we want to answer any questions you may have. I'm sorry you're not seeing the full slide, but you all have a handout in front of you too, so hopefully that helps. First of all, the purpose and the products. The project will serve multiple purposes. Visioning is an opportunity to engage your community, and as Sue said, that's a very important part of our work in community planning. We feel it's important to have a meaningful discussion with your community throughout a master planning process. And a visioning provides an opportunity to create interest and excitement about what is possible in your community. It is also an opportunity to educate and learn from each other. So it's an opportunity for you to highlight some of the things that are good about your community, maybe think about some of the ways you can improve it, and really talk about your community as a whole, which is not something that you get to do on a regular basis. So we begin by helping everyone involved understand where the community is at this point in time, assessing some trends to understand where the town might be going. And then the discussions help participants decide, is this the right direction that we're headed in? Do we continue on this path, or do we create different tools that can help us guide us in a slightly different direction? And is there a slightly different future that we want to work towards? With a clear vision in place, we can begin to ask questions that will help the community identify key issues, and then, as part of phase 2, identify those strategies and action items that you're going to use to create that vision. We're pleased that you will have a master plan committee that would be actively engaged in the planning process, because we feel that partnership and community involvement in guiding the visioning process is really important. It's truly your process. We are helping you to organize and implement it. The roles you play, we would ask you to play a role as facilitators, and I'm talking about the master plan committee. Facilitators of focus group discussions, at public forums, help the community assume ownership of this plan. We also believe strongly in engaging your boards and committees, so people who aren't necessarily on your master plan committee, they can provide a wealth of information, and they can help ground the discussions in reality and facts. Successful visioning depends on the involvement of community members, and the involvement also comes from effective outreach, and we will work with you to make sure that that outreach is effective, that you're reaching the right community, right members of your community, people that maybe aren't normally on your radar. So our proposal outlined a work plan that includes 7 tasks that are spread out over 9 months from August through April. It's a time frame that allows conversations to be quickly followed by action so that you can build momentum and sustain that momentum. It does require that we hit the ground running. Now I am understanding that we're partway through August. Maybe we'd have to shift it a little bit depending on how that would work for the town's schedule. So we would hit the ground running to schedule a first public forum before the holidays, and the schedule also provides opportunity to schedule some focus group discussions, some more smaller group discussions in between those public forums. Our work plan includes regular contact with the master plan committee and the planning director. We regularly do weekly conference calls with our clients. We feel it's very important to be consistently in check with the clients, because that's how we can make sure no issues come up before they need to be resolved. We also usually maintain a web page, which we propose doing for this project, and we can set up a blog, Facebook page, additional online outreach. We also integrate email ability to send comments via email. We can talk more about that because there's pros and cons to that interaction as well. So our experience with social media and online web presence is that it's best if it's informational primarily, but we think it's important to have that opportunity for input and engagement for the larger community, and particularly for making sure that the information about the master plan is out there on a consistent, regular basis. So then the final task would be the final report and recommended actions for phase 2, which would be completed at the end of April of next year. So task 1, we would be in touch with, again, on a regular basis with the Master Plan Steering Committee or the town planner on a regular basis. As I mentioned, weekly call-ins in addition to face-to-face meetings. And I talked already about the website, which we can explain more if you have questions. Again, I want to try to cover this so that we can get to your questions. Task 2 is the review and research. We will collect data and information so that we can provide some sort of baseline information at that first public forum. And again, this isn't a thorough existing conditions, but it's looking at what's out there already. And again, just making sure people have a broad understanding of the community, sort of what the existing trends are, so that they can have some informed discussions, around the topics. Public forums, we've suggested 3 public forums as part of this process. We would rely on the Master Plan Committee and staff to assist with the publicity, help identify an appropriate location, some of the logistics and appropriate scheduling. We also encourage you to consider food and refreshments. That definitely encourages participation. The events and initiatives we've outlined in our proposal include both public forums and focus groups, and I'll talk about the focus groups in a second. And in order to, in these public forums, engage in small group discussions, we propose to train Master Plan Committee members as facilitators. We've done this pretty regularly in all of our Master Plan projects, particularly of late. We find that it's an effective way to engage members of the community in leading the discussions. We provide the facilitator instructions. It's pretty much following a script, but we feel that you get a little bit more of a dynamic discussion than if it's some consultant talking at you or trying to encourage you to talk to each other. The purpose of the first public forum would be to get the community talking about what they want for Milton. What do they love? What defines Milton? What would they like to see change? And as you'll see, we call it this sort of assets and liabilities talk. The follow-on conversations would focus on identifying some of the major issues that are impacting the town and share ideas about some broad goals and objectives for achieving or addressing those issues. We also are suggesting as part of public forum number 3 that it's more of an informal open house venue. And again, we can modify this depending on what you would prefer, but in this way you get some interaction, people get to review what's been produced and actually have some input into the actual products. The focus group discussions are an opportunity to allow for targeted outreach to specific demographic or interest groups that might otherwise be underrepresented in the public forums or who may have a particular expertise or knowledge base on one or more of the master plan elements. And we are proposing facilitating up to 2 of these focus group discussions with the ability to expand that beyond that by training you to actually participate these, lead these in your community. And again, this is something we've tried with success in other communities. It's sort of roughly modeled on the study circle model, where people go and have conversations in their living rooms with neighbors, friends. But we've modified that to, include community groups. It's not quite as time intensive as a study circle approach, but it may be something that you've heard of before. We would have regular progress reports that we provide to the planning board. So those again, is an opportunity to continually keep you engaged in the process. And we've scheduled a couple actual in-person meeting presentations to the planning board at key points in the process. And finally, the outcome of this would be a report with the plan sections laying out the vision, including the summaries of the public meetings, and setting the goals and objectives, and identifying the key priority areas or key issue areas, again, to lay the groundwork for phase 2. We would also provide a presentation for you to utilize at town meeting and make recommendations for phase 2, which is task 7. Again, framing the rest of your master plan based on what we've learned in phase 1. What are the next steps? We can provide you with cost estimates, help you develop an RFP for phase 2, and so forth. So that's a quick brush of our proposal. I'm going to leave you with just why we think we are the firm of choice. There are good reasons that we find our clients will tell you this as well. As Sue said, you'll be working with us. We are the firm principals. We do the work. We answer to you. We're highly accessible and responsive and flexible. And you'll hear this from our references. The project would be a top priority for us. It's not something we're just filling in the cracks with. So I think those are all assets of choosing a firm like ours. All right, with that, I'd like to open up to questions.
All right. Yes.
I have 6 questions that I'll be asking all of the firms, the same questions. So
How much time have we allocated to each of these?
we allocated roughly half an hour to each.
Okay. Cool.
So,
One thing I might mention is that on the assisted living residence development zoning, it's been filed with the selectmen, and I think Bill Clark is upstairs going over it with them.
He just handed it to me, so I'm just reviewing it right
And
now.
I think he's upstairs.
Oh,
with the selectmen now. If you want to be up there to see what he's saying.
You might want to go upstairs and be with the selectmen rather than with
It's late on a Thursday. All right, so first of 7. Of all the things, of all the things that you've said, what do you feel is the most important element of a visioning process? If you had to pick one key.
Either one.
I think
we might have the
both-
same.
We might have the same answer. I think the most important is to make sure that your community feels like they've been heard. I think one thing that often happens in visionings is that a lot of things get said. It's not always reported back in a transparent way. Even if they are these dialogues and so forth are considered in the visioning document, it's important to make sure people can see where their ideas were logged. They can understand how that vision was formulated. And I think the other part of the visioning that's really important is people understanding that it's not going to just be a vision, that it's going to lead to action.
And following on from that, what particular strengths do you bring that address those two elements?
My turn?
Go ahead.
We're so fair. I think some of the strengths that we have as a team are that we are very approachable, and people feel in the community feel and find us comfortable having a dialogue with. I think we're also effective at directing or facilitating dialogues between groups or people that may not have those on a regular basis. I think, again, if you'll check our references, I think that you'll find that when we go into a community, we kind of bring out people and they're happy to talk to us, and that way we can get the dialogue started and get, issues documented. So I think our communication would be key, and how we listen and get other people to listen to each other.
And I also think we practice what we preach in saying that, what I pointed out as a problem with the vision in terms of transparency and people not feeling that they were heard. We make sure that we provide clear summaries of the discussions. We include that in our interim reports as well as in our final reports. We want you to respond to those and say, as participants, as facilitators, did we capture all the ideas? And I think the other part of that is that we try to be clear about the process. Where is this headed? Why are we doing this? And how will this be resolved?
The third question is, visioning processes can get a little loose. So how will you focus the forums on the elements of 81D rather than letting them sort of move out to all sorts of different topics?
So we have a number of different forum agendas. I think we included a few in our proposal. One of them, we don't just sort of have a broad brainstorm on all issues in the community as an end point. We do encourage people to think broadly, but we try to have questions that prompt people to think about specific aspects of their community. We can do that either as one small group discussion that talks about all of the elements of the master plan, or we can break it out into topical groups and people rotate around. So we do make sure that those topics are included in the questions of the visioning discussion so that they don't just sort of go on the wayside. And I think the other important part of what you have asked for is that focus group discussion allows you to make sure that each of those elements get addressed, because one of the things that we would make sure happens is that there is a focus group on each topical element.
If I could just add for a brief piece, I would say that being clear with the people that you're communicating what your goal is at each step of the way, when you go into a public forum, say, these are our goals for this, and then they can, it helps them to direct and know what you want out of them. So being clear in what you're asking will help people give you what you need.
You answered number 4, which is, will you personally be involved in the project? The fifth one is, since we are a little late getting started, as you can see from tonight, we've had quite a heavy agenda, and I can assure you it's been like that the last couple of months. Will we still be able to make a final report by the May 2013 ATM?
Yeah, I think the key things that your schedule would want to accommodate are making sure that we can figure out how to schedule public forums around the holidays. But we are, as a firm, we're flexible and open to a change in your schedule, and I think we could still easily achieve the final products by April, if not sooner.
And the final question is, why do you want to work with us? Why do you want to work with the town of Milton?
I'll say, you want to go? Or?
Sure.
Okay.
It's not because of the traffic. It's not our love of traffic. We get a real kick out of helping communities vision and finding agreements, what their shared values are, and try to help them find strategies for getting there. I think you're probably well on your way. I think you probably know that. But I think still it's an opportunity to reassess and reevaluate and come together and say, is this what we want, and are we using the right tools for getting there?
I think for a community like Milton, knowing that you have a very engaged community in certain aspects, that that challenge of challenge and opportunity presented by working with an engaged community. There's a lot of great ideas out there and people willing to share them. We like that. We like that participation element. But we also like challenging you a little bit and making sure that you're engaging all the relevant parties. In communities like Milton, we've worked in other ones where there are engaged and educated folks that have good visions for their community. And we sort of try to challenge them a little bit and say, you know, are you speaking for your whole community? Are you reflecting all of the viewpoints that are represented? So I think that there's a challenge to working in communities like Milton that we appreciate, but we also like the opportunities presented by working with Milton in the fact that you do have an engaged population.
Those are my questions.
All right, well, I think that, anyone else?
Yes.
Yeah. Mike?
I've not been involved with the master plan before, so some of my questions may seem very general to you, but I can see in a town that has, you know, vast areas that are undeveloped, and I can see from some of the plans that not necessarily you folks did, but some of the other organizations, that there's towns even close by here that have downtown areas that are dilapidated, for lack of better terms, and they're trying to figure out how to revitalize. Would you find Milton to be a challenge in the sense that presently there's vast tracts of open space, there's very limited commercial area, there's very vast areas of residential properties, and I guess where I'm leading is, where are we going with the town? Where can we make changes? And I haven't grown up in Milton, but I've lived in this area for quite a while, and I haven't seen great changes in Milton. And I would find that a lot of people would probably say good. I mean, you know, I don't want to keep falling back on this, but Newsweek says we're number 2 in the country to live in.
Yep.
And it's like, where are you going to improve? And not only where are you going to improve, but where can you, given the built-out nature of Milton? I mean, have you run into a town where you do a visioning process and you say, well, I think we're done?
I have to say, we've never encountered a community that we've just sort of, at the end of the process, that kind of were like, well, we're just happy where we are, and that didn't really mean anything. There's always something you can find, an opportunity for improvement, or even if it's to help guide whatever change that happens, to guide it the way you want it to happen, even if it's close to what it's like now. That's as much of an outcome of a valid outcome of a master plan as is we want to redevelop a big swath of our community, or we want to provide a whole bunch of housing, or we want to do more commercial development. It's just as valid to say we want to protect a lot of what we already have and keep it that way, and how can we do that? I would say that every master plan process we do, I feel that there's a contingent that gets a voice that maybe doesn't have one right now. Whether or not that shapes the master plan significantly, it's still an important part of the process. And, you know, we worked in a lot of New England communities, a lot of Massachusetts communities that have significant built areas that, you know, there's not a lot of capacity for significant change, but it's how that little incremental change in the middle. And it's a tool for your board. When you are hearing neighbors talking about developments, you know, those little, what may seem like small developments have capacity to influence a community over time. And so to have a document that says what you want to protect as well as what you might want to change is really a valid use of a planning document.
My biggest concern would be that you have a technique to make sure that you feel comfortable that you've got the opinion of the vast majority. There's certainly vocal people in town that'll be vocal, have been vocal, but I don't want a minority to lead this town in any direction.
We do try to make sure that in our participation numbers, we track where people are from, who they represent, and we compare it to your demographics in the community. That's one tool you can utilize. Rather than just sheer numbers, we try to say, well, it doesn't matter if you have 100 people at a meeting, if they're all from a certain demographic and they don't represent the demographic of the community at large, you may be missing a population, which is why the focus groups are so important, because you can target some outreach to some of those groups that maybe are underrepresented.
Yeah. Well, I have, there are only 2 of you. What happens when you have to be in Leominster and we want you here?
Well, I'll say that as a firm of two, we have the job load of two. So we try to make sure, it's a tough balance, but we try to make sure that we aren't over capacity. We try to be as responsive as possible to our clients. Being present for you is not a problem, but at the meetings themselves, we ask for your participation in facilitating the group discussions. That's how we spread our load. But in terms of being in Leominster instead of being here, that's never an issue for us because we have the capacity, the job capacity that our two-person firm can handle.
And I think that comes with, for us, it's good planning ahead of time and having a clear process and making sure that you're comfortable with the process that's laid out, so we're not thinking, oh, I should have done that, we need to add that to the schedule. But, you know, when you have a clear process, it's manageable.
Okay, well, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you very
so
much.
Emily, would you go in and,
Call the next group? Absolutely.
and, yes. As I said, we will make a determination at our next meeting.
Great, thank you.
Our second group community is community opportunities, right? They are not here, but VHB is. Do you want to take them out of order?
Of course.
All right.
We were going to, since we're being taped, maybe we won't make that, we won't make a comparison.
Publicly, verbally right now, you mean we won't compare? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm simply saying that taking people out of order is a good thing to do. It is the only thing to do.
And while they set up, I'm just going to run upstairs to the selectmen's and see if maybe the second group got lost upstairs instead of coming down here.
And if they're at the selectmen's, then the second group will probably have
Actually, do that, yes. They may want to reprieve, Gene. Community opportunities, yes.
But I don't think that if, just speaking about the assisted living residence development people, there's much to discuss right now.
Probably not, no. I think
So if they come back, I think that we could say that you're done for the night.
I think that's fair, rather than making them wait, poor guys.
Rather than
My heart actually sank when I saw them, because I was thinking, yet again, they're going to be the very last item on our agenda.
All right.
We're not ready yet, but we're going to be shooting right into your eyes.
No, I
sir.
understand that. We put this down. We got the technique.
Okay. I don't want to blind you. Some great old pictures in here.
Yeah.
Well, this is a beautifully decorated room.
Yes.
And it has a nice cool feeling to it, doesn't it?
I think of it as being a very calm feeling. He's giving me grief because I chose the colors and helped choose the pictures and the furniture.
So what, I complimented her, now I have to find a way to compliment you.
All right.
Unknowingly.
How are you doing?
Good.
You getting close?
Pardon?
Close to set up?
Yep. Yeah. Just
Good.
Hi.
Oh, there they are.
They were upstairs.
You were upstairs.
You want us to?
Continue, yeah.
Just. Well, that gives you just fine. You can go on last, just like, we're running late anyway.
We don't mind waiting if you want to take that.
We're going to let Mrs. Innes determine. Okay, what have you determined?
They were told 850, so actually that would have put them at the end anyway.
That's what we were told.
That's what we were told too.
You were told 850 also.
Yes.
Well,
And
since you're mostly set up.
It is 850 right now.
Well, that's pretty good for us.
Almost.
All right, okay.
So this is not projecting, obviously, for some.
Is it- Oh, the cap's still on.
There's a cap on the front of it.
We kept it on so it wouldn't blind the camera. And you may have to put it on that brown thing to keep your picture going.
With this.
Tack something onto the back end.
Can you make it smaller to fit the screen in? Zoom down. So I can come closer. Closer you go, the smaller it gets.
Yeah, these things out. Oh, you can use those.
Yes. Because I need to get the.
Okay. Good. You're all set, obviously, we're all set. Thank you for inviting us here tonight. I'm Jeff Fasser, I'm the Director of Planning and Landscape Architecture for VHB, and with me is Jeffrey Morrison Logan,
Good evening.
one of our senior planners and one of our staff who is really focuses on visioning processes like this and public outreach. So we were told to take about 10 minutes to give you a quick presentation about our skills and how we would approach this, and then open it up for Q&As. That's what we're planning to do. First of all, what I'd like to stress is that VHB has a number of different disciplines in-house, but we have a very active and growing planning and design group, and that's what Jeffrey and I are part of. Throughout the company, we have about 60-plus planners in all our offices. VHB is headquartered in Watertown, and in Watertown, we have 10 or 12 planners in Watertown itself. And this project will be run out of Watertown, which is where Jeffrey and I are located. So we have those resources to draw upon as we work with you to help you prepare your vision plan. In addition to working locally, we also have experience working up and down the East Coast. For example, Jeffrey recently came back from his visioning process in Florida, a 4-day process there, helping them with some visioning for one of their projects in Florida. He's also done that in Virginia, but we all do a lot in the Massachusetts area. So we're not doing things all over the place, but he's a resource that helps support our projects in company-wide. In addition to our planning and our visioning and our public outreach skills, when it comes to community projects like this, there's a recent emphasis on sustainability, which we're able to bring to the table if that's something that's of interest to Milton. And we have some innovative and unique experiences with public outreach that we can build upon and work with you to craft a plan that's really going to work for you. With that, some of the things, as I mentioned earlier, I'd like to draw upon are our different disciplines within the company. Again, we understand this is a planning project, a visioning process, but as needed, we can draw upon other resources in the company if there's a historic issue, for example, a transportation issue. And the last two things are very important on a project like this because a lot of times it's communicating ideas, and we have graphic design as well as graphic information mapping support in-house. A lot of our plans, whether they're locally or regionally, have been award-winning plans, whether they be vision plans or master plans. A lot of these master plans have visioning as the first step in the process. So I know that's one thing that Milton is looking at is doing this vision plan with the potential that it may lead to a bigger comprehensive plan. And a lot of these projects have visioning as that first step in that overall larger planning process. And these are just some examples of our vision plans. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Jeffrey. Jeffrey would be the project manager for this job. We work very closely together on projects like this, so you see both of us quite a bit. but we're supported by a deep staff. But Jeffrey would be your main point of contact.
Great, and as Jeff mentioned, we're excited about this because we know that going into producing plans like this, it kind of requires a lot of different perspectives. And I think you saw probably from our proposal, and we thought getting there is really about a few keys to success. And I think if you looked at the approach part of our proposal, really assembling our internal team, which is not, again, Jeff and myself, but we have transportation folks, we have graphic designers, we have GIS experts and so forth that we bring in strategic locations to help us support the events to get the right input that we need. We also thought what's key to this is really thinking about how we can use all of the tools and techniques that I'll talk about in a second to make the public process really dynamic, really engaging. And as Jeff mentioned, we do this up and down the East Coast, so we're going to bring all those resources and tools that we've used to Milton and make it really resonate here. We've done a lot of work up at the front end on these types of projects, understanding the issues and the constraints, and Milton has done a lot of great work about their documentation, the prior planning work that we'll look at, and we're looking to build upon those. That's a very important ingredient. We pride ourselves on producing graphics that are easy to understand and read. We do not want to produce documents that sit on the shelf, so we'll show you a few examples of those. And really, this ultimately is about producing this vision statement, getting the community to embrace it and so forth, and really queue up the next step, which is really understanding grant funding and how the structure of the comprehensive planning process, the master planning process, can move forward. So those are really the highlights from our proposal on the strategies. So who's involved in our team? Obviously with Jeff and myself that are up the top there. You'd be seeing a lot of ourselves here. We would be the key people that we were working with the town staff, as well as the master plan committee. And on the bottom there, we listed some of the key people that we would want to bring in the process, especially at some of these workshops where we'd have zoning experts, transportation experts, people who deal with natural resources, land use, which is one of Jeff's expertise, and infrastructure is a big part of this too. So we'd be bringing those in. As well as we always like to work these process with the master planning committee themselves. So we structure in a way where it's not just ourselves as facilitators, but bring in the committee along the way too. And we have a lot of in-house talented graphic designers for communication as well. So a little bit about the process. I think the goal here is obviously to get the visioning in place and the vision statement in place here. So I want to share with you a little bit about the tools and the techniques that I mentioned before. We do everything from websites to having breakout group sessions to doing the buttons on the bottom right there where they're name tags where people can come to events. We do the branding and the identity. We really incorporate that into the products that we do along the way. So I thought I'd show you a little bit about the process that we can envision for here. This is an example of some of the project identity that we developed for a multiple jurisdiction project in Aquidneck Island in Rhode Island, where it's 3 communities. We went through a process of branding it, doing the logos. The client in this case picked concept number 3 here, but it shows you how you can come up with these ideas and use it through the life of the project, which we think will be important to get the people out and get engaged and excited about creating this vision statement. We take things like that, and here's a different project we worked up in Keene, New Hampshire, and we apply it to all the different things that we produce, from the flyers to from the announcements to the visioning documents themselves. And in this case, we took the logo and the T-shirt, and we had all of the facilitators wearing those T-shirts. So it's just one of these kind of fun ways of getting people excited about the process, and we think it makes a big difference. So when we do these events, and again, Jeff mentioned we do these in a lot of different ways, from 4-day charrettes to 1-day workshops and weekends, weeknights. We customize it with the client. It's not always the same process repeated. We look to the tools and techniques to make it apply here. We think about it from when you start the event to when you finish the event. This is one of the techniques we've been using called live work boards, where as people come in, they don't just sign in on a regular sheet. They put a push pin where they live, where they work. What's great about it is you get a snapshot about where the community representatives are coming from, where they work, and so forth, so you can maybe be able to fine-tune some of the topic or some of the content for the evening about where people living in the neighborhood. Also, I think we always say that the old-fashioned way, so to speak, always works. We've got a lot of experience about facilitating small groups, large groups, base maps that we can all produce here, taking those notes and giving people the tools that they want to do, and it's all about them and talking at these events. So the old-fashioned way definitely still works. Some of the other tools we use are, if people are not interested in talking and you have to accommodate for them too, we do this post-it note boards where you can place comments on a post-it. You're able to give them the ability to answer questions. Maybe they're about elements of the comprehensive plan, maybe they're about elements of the vision statement. So giving them ability to write things down if they're not comfortable talking. We learn a lot from that, and you get so many comments when you come out of a meeting from that, not just about the conversations. We also use things like, like Legos, for example. putting things in place for people to vision and think about building and giving them something tactile to do is always kind of interesting, especially for the kids. Older generations, younger generations, thinking about them as well is very important. And I thought what we'd do really quickly, Jeff's going to hand these out just to show you one of the more innovative ones that we've been doing. This is a tool that we've been using at a lot of community events. It's called Turning Point. It works with PowerPoint. And what you'll see here, again, thinking about the different audiences and about people who like technology, people who like it the old-fashioned way, you can literally ask questions on this and get instantaneous responses. So imagine being in a public meeting and wanting to ask a polling question about land use or about transportation. We can craft those questions and see what the responses that we get. And we typically use this in a way, and we introduce it to people, we show them how it can be used, we try to make it fun. So here we put together a question. I think it's kind of interesting here. Why are you interested in planning? You can use the clickers here and the black dots, vote 1 through 3 on here, and we'll get the instantaneous results. And the question is, why are you interested in planning? I really enjoy reading zoning codes is number 1. I love occupying my evening hours in long, contentious public meetings. What is a planner anyway is the third one there. We typically put in there none of the above, some of the above, I don't know, just to make sure people are comfortable with the responses on here, but this is just kind of an icebreaker.
If everybody could vote, pick 1 through 3, and we can show you how we can display your answers immediately.
So I think we have them in there. Great. So what's great about it is calculating it, and we can get the responses that come out instantaneously, so that we know, a lot of people love being at late meetings apparently. So, so more to the point, I think here is this is how we'd probably use the tool here, thinking about what are the planning issues that are facing Milton, tying it back to the relevant issues, tying it back to the vision statement, maybe part of the comprehensive plan. So in this case, we put questions in here and answers. What is the most important planning issue? Number 1 is about planning for economic development. 2 is about revising the zoning code. 3 is about open space preservation. 4 is providing more housing choices. 5 is all of the above. Again, we typically put in none of the above or some of the above. So why don't you go ahead and vote on this one too?
Yeah, if everybody again could vote.
And again, I think it will tell you a little bit how we'd use this tool. So there it is. Interesting. So obviously spreading across all of the disciplines. So you can see how it's a pretty powerful tool, and we could really shape the wrap-up of these events around what we learned by using that as a tool. So we've also in our proposal included Mind Mixer, and I'm not sure if you know about those social media type tools. There's a lot of them out there today, and we put the ones that are typically out there. We thought Mind Mixer was most applicable in that what's great about it is you can have these types of questions used at a public event. That dialogue keeps living online while you're thinking between these public meetings. You're able to get people to come up with ideas, you're able to give them points and things like that. It's almost like a game, if you will, and offer them the ability maybe to meet with the planning staff over lunch as kind of the award for having some of the greatest ideas, and it gives kind of excitement to the community from that perspective too. What we like to do is take all of these tools and techniques that we've said from the branding and from the graphic productions and our graphic skills and embed them in all of the work that we do. So that's pretty important so far as communicating the message. This is one example from the cover of the proposal to the final CD and all the PowerPoints. I think that identity and the branding becomes pretty important to having a successful event and project. And I thought we'd just do is show you how we apply that to some of these key documents. In the vision plans that we do, the 2 boards on the upper part and the bottom left really summarize the entire vision for a whole city center in Holyoke down to 6 key elements about what makes it important to that plan, and those things were carried through the report that are in the bottom there as well. So I think we're pretty skilled at kind of boiling things down and talking about vision plans and so forth that manner. Here's some of the other products that we've done here, from report covers to boards on the left there that summarize the entire downtown areas, CDs and so forth. This is a project that we just wrapped up in Florida where it was a 15-mile corridor about land use, transportation, and trying to understand all of those goals and objectives on 2 30-by-40 boards. We do a lot of work with the community, as I mentioned, and we do flyers and websites as well. And here's some of our graphic design group skill sets where they package brochures and so forth, and just a few of these that show you that I think that's a really important part of it as well, especially when you're doing the visioning part. Gives you a sense of it. And we thought we'd leave it on this slide here because hopefully during the Q&A we can talk about how some of those things apply to Milton, which has some pretty unique aspects to it. Obviously the open space, the connectivity to the highways and so forth, the land uses, the mix of them and so forth, And I can see why the visioning part is going to be a very important part to get right up front before you go into the comprehensive planning process. So we'd love to open it up for Q&A.
Right, you can have the,
Hand this out or later?
Emily, why don't you,
Yeah, I'm afraid the other board members are going to get very bored because I have the same set of questions for all of you.
Sure.
So of all the things that we've discussed with us tonight so far, what do you feel is the most important element of the visioning process?
I think we actually said it in the proposal, is getting people involved. That was one of the things that we highlighted. What's key about that is, having people show up to the events, making sure you got representation from the different neighborhoods, the older generations, the younger generations. I think that the thing that we showed you about the Legos in there is kind of interesting. This is really about your plan. It's about what the vision is for the future for the people who live here. So getting them involved in this and structuring those tools to make them feel like they're part of that process is probably the most assured way to get you to the answers I think you're looking for.
And a lot of times, and it may be different in Milton, in many communities, you see the same people coming out and participating and really being civic-minded, which is great. And we want to get those people part of this process, but we also try all these innovative tools to try to get new people involved, to make sure we're hearing all the different ideas and opinions. And that's why, again, we try some of these innovative approaches, including social media and the mind mixer that Jeffrey mentioned. Some people who may not feel comfortable coming out or don't have the time to come out to an evening meeting after work and kid stuff, they can get online at their convenience and give us input that way. So really, the getting as many people involved as possible makes it a stronger plan.
You partially answered this, but I will give you the opportunity to add more. What are your strengths in addressing that element of getting people out and involved, in addition to the social media and the tools?
I think I mentioned it that we really think that there's not one outreach plan that fits all of our clients that's the same. So it's very typical that at the outset of a project that we'd sit down and we'd review all those different tools and techniques. And we're going to learn a lot from you and the client as the process about what's going to work here. So we always customize it. So I think that's probably the biggest part that we're going to work out up front to make sure that we do that. So do we have a meeting on a certain night of the week or on the weekend? Do we have it staged throughout the day so people can come during lunch hours, business evening hours, or on the weekend? Who are the community leaders that we want to reach out to? We're going to be asking you all of those types of questions and producing the flyers in different formats. Is it something that you email? Is it something that goes through the school system? That's going to be the most effective way to get the word out.
And sometimes we will ask you also if there are other events going on that either we or you could go to get information. Might there be something related to a school event or a meeting there that we could piggyback upon? Is there some neighborhood group or certain organization in town that's having a meeting? So instead of asking them to take another night out to come to one of our events, we figure out a way to go to their event and get input for 15 to 20 minutes from them.
Now, once you give people to a public forum, they start talking about things that can sometimes quickly get away from the original purpose. How will you focus those forums on the elements of 81D in the master plan?
Do you want to talk about it first?
Not to avoid the question, but as Jeffrey said, we structure these different ways for different communities.
Okay.
But one of the things we typically recommend are what are called breakout groups. So we get a large group together and then break them into smaller groups with a facilitator or two at each table to do that. We find that it's easier to keep things under control that way. Typically, VHB would have somebody at that table, and we'd like to have someone from the community, from the steering committee or master plan committee with us at that table. We have training, it's called National Charette Institute training on how to facilitate these public meetings, keep things under control, be polite, but keep people focused. And we would come and train the other people from the community that may be at a table with us on some of those techniques, so that we have people there that keep things focused. We have a list of questions that people can go through so that We make sure they get to all the topics we want to have addressed. Another way to deal with it is sometimes we don't break them out and discuss a variety of topics at each table, but we may break them out and have a table on transportation, a table on economic development, a table on land use, and people can circulate around and provide input depending on what their topic of interest is. And again, there'd be facilitators at each table, and in that case, someone who has an expertise with that particular topic that could help keep things focused. Typically with some questions that we may turn to ask if we need to bring things back into focus, but a lot of times just with our facilitation skills, we can keep things on track.
And we typically use, ground rules. Those are always a good thing, especially at the outset of a process like this, to let people know this is what we're here for. Here's what we're setting up to do. We all need to kind of agree to these rules together so that we can have a productive meeting. And as Jeff mentioned, having key staff there or resources there that if for some reason someone is stuck on a topic and it's not about that agenda for the night, we can say, please go see that staff person over there. There's a resource table. They can handle that so that we can keep the momentum of the meeting going. But having those kind of tools and techniques along the way goes a long way towards keeping the momentum going.
And you've also partially answered this, but will you be involved on a regular basis with this project? So you're the project manager and you're...
His right-hand man. Yeah, the two of us will be very much engaged with this whole project. Again, as a project manager, Jeffrey would be your point of contact on a daily basis or whatever. But we envision for most of the meetings, if they're going to be structured as we typically would expect, you will see both of us, and then we'll bring other staff in.
Since we're a little late getting started on the schedule that we put in the RFP, not just tonight, but in general, we've had a very, very busy agenda this spring and summer. Are we still going to be able to meet our schedule of having our final report prior to our May 2013 annual town meeting?
We see no trouble with that. We'd probably, in order to keep the momentum going, probably suggest we move it through this very quickly so there aren't a lot of gaps between civic engagement processes for events.
And final question from me, why do you want to work with the town of Milton?
Great question. This is what we love doing. I mean, Jeff and I have worked together for many years, and it's a lot of fun. This is what we really like doing, and it's great working with communities. We've worked up and down the East Coast, but in particular, setting the vision up front is important for so many reasons, and getting people to get the consensus together for things to fall in place. And it's kind of challenging to do, it's rewarding to do, and getting to know the communities and the neighborhoods and the leaders and so forth is what we like doing. And particularly here, I think the town has a lot of different things going on, which is going to make it very interesting. But most importantly, this is what we really like doing here. And I think we can bring a lot of those skills here, and it would be a lot of fun. So we're really looking forward to the opportunity.
Yeah. I echo everything he said, plus we like to make it fun, and that's going to get people coming back too. If the people leading the process enjoy it and kind of give that sense of energy and enjoyment, I think that brings people back to the subsequent events.
Thank you very much.
Mike?
I like one thing you addressed, and that is I'm always concerned that a minority might lead the visioning.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems to me that there are a lot of people probably out there that don't get regularly engaged in civic occasions that should be heard, and that are probably the majority of the people in town. Mm-hmm. Beyond that, I asked previously, do you see Milton as a challenge? And what I mean by that is presently Milton has a lot of open space. Mm-hmm. A historic organization just bought 75 acres to preserve beyond the blue hills that we have. And the commercial areas we have are very limited. The vast majority of the town is residential. Mm-hmm. I stated previously, I didn't grow up in Milton, but I've lived in this area, and Milton, as far as I see, hasn't changed a great deal in my lifetime. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people in Milton would say, good. Mm-hmm. We're where we want to be. Mm-hmm. I mean, Newsweek says #2 town in America, big deal. Maybe that means something, maybe it doesn't.
Yes.
But I guess where I'm leading this to is, have you run into situations where the visioning process led you to a situation where you said, hey, guys, I don't think you need a grand master plan. Maybe all we could develop out of this is maybe you need to tweak some zoning bylaws over here, and beyond that, I don't know where we could take you with a vast, master plan.
Yes, I mean, there are, certainly, that is what the visioning process is intended to do. And so whether it's a visioning process that's a standalone document and product, or whether it's the prelude to a master plan, it really sets the stage for what the community needs to focus on. And we've done vision plans that have set the stage in and of themselves, and the community's been able to take actions without a big master plan process afterwards. And in some cases, it does lead to a more comprehensive look at either the whole community or a larger area of the community. It's part of the process, but we think it's important to do that visioning up front, and no matter what the process is, to get as best you can a consensus. And we're not going to kid you to say everybody's going to buy into this vision plan. We would love that. That's our goal. But the reality is, some people are going to have to learn to give and take a little bit to get to whatever that vision is. And if that vision means there are a lot of issues and you really need to look at some areas much more comprehensively, that should come out of the vision process to get the community behind it, so you do that larger look at things. But if, as you said, it's just some tweaking and some minor things, you can take care of that with a much more streamlined process.
I mean, have you run into a community, I mean, when you talked about a 15-mile tract in Florida, I read your new plan somewhat in Holyoke.
Yes.
I mean, you displayed some areas of town that are obviously dilapidated, that need some concepts of what we're gonna do with this area. I mean, I don't see that in Milton. I'm wondering, have you recently ran into a situation where you went through a visioning process and said, where is the room to take this town? I mean, where is the room to build anything out? We're built out, we're a very small geographic area.
Right. I think the obvious answer is it depends on what the town is. And you picked up on some really good ones in Holyoke, where the issue there was it had seen a certain population, it had seen a certain kind of workforce base that came there. The city was designed to serve as one of the first industrial cities. That had come and gone. The population had dropped probably at least half to what it was. So it was dealing with things that was about how do you repopulate, how do you take urban centers and rejuvenate them. Here you have a uniquely different set of issues here. You grew up in a different way, your natural resources are very different. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if the issues that come up during this process are different than that. But I think the broader takeaway is that during that visioning process, you're going to identify some of those issues. They might be small, they might be big, and I think with the common denominators, you find that there are things that you need to deal with in that visioning process. It's then turns into, what is it that you have to do about it? Do you need a more elaborate vision plan that shows you about redevelopment and that stuff? Or is it more on the policy, the zoning, affordability, that are maybe less about the pretty pictures and more about some of those tools and techniques to help you get where you want to be? But I think the visioning process will unfold those. And I think part of what I think is interesting about our team is that we can bring in those experts along the way to help you if it goes more towards a zoning answer versus a sustainability answer versus a transportation. But I have to believe there's issues there, but it can range from dramatic change to small change. But the way you find it out when you get there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I just, you mentioned old-fashioned, I guess some of my thoughts up, I don't want to fix something that isn't broke.
Well, Judge, that raises a good point. Sometimes you'll find out that there's only a few things that you need to do, and that would be a great problem to have, where there's not a lot of things, but sometimes you might find that it's a lot of little things, too. And we've seen the range, I guess is the point.
Well, it looks to me like you use technology to advantage. Would you say that's true, that you have a technological approach? You use a lot of technology in your work, it seems to me. Is that?
Yes.
Help impress people?
I guess I would say it's more of a comprehensive approach, because we want to reach out to as many people as possible. As you were mentioning earlier, how do you get to some of the people that haven't felt comfortable or find a way to participate before? So we find technology is one way of engaging people. We also find the old-fashioned face-to-face is a way. For people who may come to a public meeting but aren't comfortable speaking publicly, the Post-it notes are a good way. Or the voting, where you don't have to say anything, you just need to vote. And your opinion counts as much as everybody else's in the room because you have one vote. as everybody else does, is another way. And that's technology, but it also is a way of getting people who aren't comfortable speaking up. We also use technology to communicate ideas, to communicate graphically, to produce plans, to produce documents, not to show off technology, but technology gives us a lot of tools that gives us simple ways to communicate ideas back to the public.
And it's not that we have to pick one of these versus the other. It's pretty common that we have an agenda where it might be, let's have a brainstorming session for half an hour to 45 minutes. Let's go back and use the voting things for 5 to 10 questions. Why don't we have further discussion or go use the post-it notes? I mean, we can do a lot of these things at the same event intentionally to make it so there's choices for people, so you're not having to pick just one means. Each event could have a lot of those things going on at the same time.
Well, Ed,
Several times you've used the term sustainability.
Yes.
Would you expand on that? What do you mean by that?
Sure. A lot of towns these days are looking not only to, to think about how they can be sustainable, but having certain parts of their comprehensive or master plan being dedicated to a sustainability chapter. So in this case, it means how are you doing things to think about greenhouse gases? How are you thinking about renewable energy? How are you thinking about maybe some of the places within your regulating tools to incorporate goals and objectives for being more sustainable, and maybe even sprinkling that through how the town approaches its vision for the future? And some towns are getting pretty progressive about how they want to incorporate that in everything that we do. So,
And to be what's called a sustainable community, I mean, a healthy community in which to live, and healthy means you need a strong economic base, you need a tax base, let's put it that way. It could be residential, it could be commercial, but you need that mix. And some are more, communities are more residential, some are less, but what is that mix, what's that proper mix to be sustainable so that Milton is great today and it's going to be great 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now? It's a mix of the balance of open space versus economic development. It's being healthy. It's what can you do so you have healthy residents, places for them to recreate and walk, breathe clean air. It's all these things that get put together, and the vision plan will probably help identify some areas that you may need to address and some other areas where you're doing perfectly fine in.
all right, well, thank you very much for
Thank you.
coming in.
Sure.
And we're going to make a determination next meeting, our next meeting on August 23rd. And so...
If you have any questions in the meantime, let us know.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Our town planning is upstairs at another meeting.
We heard.
Great. Well, thank you very much for
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Give you a few minutes to unplug. I'll be able to
Yep.
start out.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, there's no way you can get an answer on,
What I have to do,
you go in town, talk to people?
what I'd have to do is have an appraisal showing that I don't have a financial interest, which I don't, but an appraisal costs a lot of money.
Can't you go in town and talk to them and tell them the dilemma we're under, in case Bernie doesn't show up again or again?
Thank
Okay,
you,
guys.
thank you very much.
Thank you. Think about it.
I will. On the committee, the 5 choices we'll make from the 27 names, I've looked at, I've gone through the names, and I am absolutely, such a great group of people
Yes, it is.
that have expressed interest, that I'm.
I didn't know we had all these people in Milton.
Alex asked me to do a slate, so you guys could, if you wanted to, hold the
And
groups
the
up.
idea
And I
would.
have some more information for you when we're ready.
The idea would, hello,
Hey, ladies.
Hi.
Yeah.
welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome to the Planning Board of Milton. We usually, we seem to meet until about 10 every meeting these days, 6:30 to 10.
That's what my experience was like on a planning board too.
So we're not
Currently
allowed.
on a zoning board of appeals, it is the same way.
Same thing.
Yes.
You just have to, at 10 o'clock, you just have to say, that's it. But we're not going to do it with you if you go on for the next 40 minutes.
No, we're not going to do that to you. We're very efficient.
We have a projector and a laptop that you can plug into.
All right, they're going to set up. Now, the idea that I had was that if she presented a slate, and we would then take a vote up or down with no further discussion.
There's 27 candidates, you said? And we're selecting 5?
No, the idea is that Emily would select a slate and then put it to us, either yay or nay.
I don't know if I like that.
I don't like that. I don't like that.
We've got to figure out how to do it, because I have looked at these, I've gone through it, and they're just,
Can I make a suggestion?
Why don't-
I actually have some suggestions on how to do it, which we
Oh,
can talk
okay.
about after this is.
Oh, okay.
set
I
up,
got a
because I think it will make
20
your lives all completely.
27.
Why doesn't everybody just select 5, and if 2 or 3 cross, then they're
I
obvious
couldn't
candidates?
select 5, because there are too many good candidates.
If you work at it, I got it down to 5. I went from 12 to 7, then I got it down to 5.
And I've got it down, but.
I tried,
Oh, yeah, the 7.
didn't get there.
So that's actually probably yours.
All right, you ready?
I think so.
Okay, well, that was efficient. You have to take the cap off the projector, though.
That would be a good idea.
Maybe one of the lads can do that. That's it.
Thank you. We actually have this in handout form.
Be careful where you walk here. It's a minefield here.
You know, it is, but that's okay. And
Thank you. Yep. We'll get the lights when you're ready.
yeah, we will. And here's a copy for you. Thank you.
G-C-O-G.
Okay. We all set?
Ready?
I think so. Interesting shadows, but we'll be just fine. Okay. We're from Community Opportunities Group. I'm Judy Barrett. I'm the planning director. And with me is Caroline Edwards, our senior planner. And we are the people that you will be working with if you choose to hire us. I want to talk a little bit about our company and what we do and where we've worked. And then Caroline's going to, I don't think this is working, Caroline. Can you just hit the, yeah. Caroline's going to talk about our approach, and then I'll bring it back to sort of wrap up. And we'll take any questions that you might have. So, we're kind of different from the planning field in that our roots are actually in the field of community development. The company was formed in 1979, so we've been around for a while. The company's original focus was very much in the community development field. At the time, the HUD Community Development Block Grant Program was fairly new. COG was working in Massachusetts, some in New Hampshire, and in Connecticut, working a lot with small towns that didn't have any staff capacity. And so the company built up quite a bit of expertise in what is it like to be inside local government. So we have a lot of hands-on experience that I think most consultants just don't bring, and it really does influence the way we interact with municipalities and really are, I think, able to do a lot of capacity assessment early on, which makes a big difference in planning. If you wait till the end to start thinking about what a community can do to implement its plan, you've probably missed a wonderful opportunity to help them actually have a plan they can really carry out. We have won awards for the last 3 years from the Mass Chapter of the American Planning Association. 2 of those awards were for comprehensive plans, one for the town of Dedham, the other for the town of Lincoln. Last year, we also won an award for a community health needs assessment and plan for the town of Lincoln. Our planning work has been really at the forefront of the company's focus for the last 15 years. I guess that was sort of the segue I wanted to just point out. Because the company had such a really excellent, stellar reputation in community development, it just became a logical segue for our work in planning. And so the planning portfolio has evolved since about 1995. We've been very successful and really love what we do. And we just bring this kind of unusual and I think very beneficial spin or twist on our work, and that we really just have a lot of experience inside town halls. We really understand municipalities. We've done a lot of master plan work in Massachusetts. We've done some related work in Connecticut. For the last few years, really, our focus has been in the greater Boston area. So, you know, your context is something that's not unfamiliar to us. Go to the next slide. Our planning philosophy is fairly simple to summarize. We think plans have got to be grounded in input from the community. Consultant-driven plans are very efficient to do. They kind of roll out in a very formulaic way, and they just don't get implemented. So we're very much kind of, proponents of grassroots planning. We really believe in it. We encourage it. We're comfortable with it. We think that plans, if they're going to work, have to be tailored to each community. We don't do boilerplate. I think if you look at our work and you look at the work of some other firms, you're going to find that we really are we're authentic, we're original, and it's because we understand how to get underneath what's going on inside cities and towns and bring out their strong suits and look honestly and openly, candidly at the things that they need to work on. Our plans are also realistic and implementable. I think any of our clients that you talk to will confirm that what we give them is a plan that they can actually carry out. That doesn't mean that the plans are short-sighted. It doesn't mean that they just sort of ignore things that are really big picture. But we try to help communities think about, if this is where you want to be, what are all the steps that you need to take in order to get there, so you don't try to jump too far too fast and end up with something that becomes very frustrating for everybody. I think the great risk to communities in having plans that, quote, sit on a shelf is largely because they have plans they really can't implement. So. We are recognized for our expertise in public process. A couple of things I just want to point out. This toolbox summarizes it kind of well. Our company is the firm that works with Citizen Planner Training Collaborative, which you may be familiar with, on how to do master plans. We're the ones who developed the module on creating a master plan for their curriculum. We're the ones who do that training. Last year, CPTC, that's the acronym for Citizen Planner Training Collaborative, hired attorney Barbara St. Andre and I to update all their modules for the planning training that they do with planning boards and boards of appeal. And the particular piece I worked on was public participation. We developed, sort of training modules and a slide presentation on all of these various tools. These are tools that we are familiar with, and I just wanted to point them out to you to suggest that one of the things I think we really bring to this field is a tremendous diversity in what these tools are. Often people kind of rely on a certain set of tools because they've just done them over and over again. We really try to work with our clients around, well, what is it that you're trying to do? Do we need to be mainly in a talking and presentation mode? Do we need to be mainly in a listening mode? What kind of format should it be? Are we talking about a large meeting, a small meeting? Well, if they're small meetings, you've got different things you can do, from focus groups to group mapping, to field trips, to scenario workshops. What do you think might work well in your community? What are the resources to support the project? And we just are able to bring all of those tools to bear on our work, and we've been very successful with it. We're also really good at kind of keeping it simple. We've done fairly elaborate work in public meetings with maps and photography and so forth, and we've done very simple things with Lincoln Logs. So, we really can kind of tailor our approach to the particular community, the budget for the process, and the kind of feel that the client wants to bring to the public participation effort. We have done visioning work with every master plan that we've done. We've also done some standalone visioning work, kind of like what your approach is. You're trying to do this sort of visioning process ahead of time. But I just want to talk a little bit about the way we approached our visioning work in a couple of these projects. In Dedham, first of all, a very neighborhood-oriented community. You couldn't do public participation in Dedham without tailoring it to that neighborhood consciousness of the town. So yes, there were some large public meetings, and they worked very well to sort of give credibility to the process and get people kind of gung-ho about doing the master plan effort. But really, a lot of the participation that mattered in the end for that plan happened at a neighborhood level. We committed the resources to doing it. It frankly was a lot of work on our part, but it was great fun, and it really inflected the plan, I think, with a very different perspective than just what you tend to hear in a town-wide meeting. But my point is, we tailored that process to what we heard from the town. We didn't just go in with, here's your 3 meetings, here's your day of interviews. We really reworked the public participation strategy based on what we heard from the town. So we did the large meetings, we did the neighborhood meetings, we did implementation workshops with the master plan committee, which was a wonderful group of people, and of course the public hearing. But the public hearing is not really a public participation effort as much as it is kind of presenting what you have at the end. The real kind of visioning, goal setting, it happens early on and throughout the process in a variety of venues, from those larger meetings to the smaller meetings. Sometimes communities like to use some technology to support those kinds of procedures. We can do that too. So, in Lincoln, I don't know if you know anything about Lincoln. It's a very unusual community. They've done a lot of planning there and a lot of innovative ways to control land use in that town. We do a lot of work in Lincoln. We just finished another project there a few weeks ago. We're starting another one now. That process involved some pre-master plan work with the community, some large group meetings that I actually went and helped to run before we had really been hired. When we started the official master plan process, there were some visioning and prioritization meetings that included kind of a day-long workshop type of arrangement where you had different subcommittees of the master plan committee had workstations. And people who were interested in open space might go to the open space workstation for an hour and a half for discussion, and then there was a bit of a break, and then they could go to the housing workstation. And so they were able to participate in a variety of discussions, which in that town was very important. You can't tell people in Lincoln you only have one shot at this. So we designed this elaborate day that was very successful. There were resident working groups for each element of the plan, and they really kind of took ownership from the very beginning in trying to vision and goal set and enlist public participation in shaping that plan. It was a remarkable effort, and we did a variety of things in the open public meetings, the big meetings, from sort of the traditional strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats analysis to getting a whole lot of ideas up on a board, and instead of using dots to prioritize them, we said, okay, so which one of these do you think are worth pursuing, and which of these ideas do you think is worth spending money on? And it was a very effective way in that town to get people to say, well, I like this idea, but I don't think I'd spend money on it, but this one I would. And it was a very effective way to kind of make the priorities happen. It worked well. It was a very successful planning process, and they took their plan to town meeting, and it was accepted almost unanimously. Dedham's was accepted unanimously. So we have a good track record. Finally, neighborhood revitalization strategies, which may seem a little bit different from what you're talking about, but I think it's very relevant. We've done 2 of these, one in Lawrence and one in Hartford, more recently in Hartford. And I just wanted to talk about this because it really brings out the variety of ways that we can enlist public participation. There were a series of public meetings to do needs assessments and priorities, a mix of presentations and surveys and small group discussions, involvement of partner groups as well as neighborhood residents. There were extensive follow-up interviews and informal on-the-street interviews as well. Literally in Lawrence, we were on the street talking to people and sort of brought the whole neighborhood revitalization strategy together by mixing all of those public participation elements, which, in my experience, makes a big difference. If you mix up the ways that you encourage people to participate, you maximize the participation. If you limit the ways that you do public participation, you're not necessarily going to get the sort of broad participation from the community that you're seeking. Okay. So Caroline's going to talk about our approach for your project.
Great, so I'm just going to stay here, that's so here, I don't want access to the slide changing, but I'm just going to walk through the approach that we laid out in our proposal. It's pretty simple. It has three main steps, and those are, first of all, sort of information gathering, getting to know the community. The next step is doing the public participation, actually going out and gathering input from stakeholders and residents. And then the final step is the synthesis and analysis. And the next steps, which in your case is really setting you up for doing the full update of your comprehensive master plan. So for this first step, getting to know Milton, we would start with a review of all of your past and ongoing planning efforts. We'd be looking for common themes and successes and failures, what worked well, what maybe didn't work so well, what you learned from those experiences. Of course, we'd review all the available data, including census, GIS, and your zoning regulations. We'd be looking to establish a demographic and economic profile of the town, as well as trends over time. Looking at development and land use patterns, how things sort of are put together and they work in your town. And then just assessing the regulatory environment. What are your land use regulations like? What can you do? What can you not do? What are your permitting processes like? Things like that are all very important sort of groundwork for the process. And we'd really hope to be using the expertise of town staff and the master plan committee, because we can learn a lot from looking at old plans and reviewing the data, but we don't, we miss a lot also, and you don't really get to the heart of what are the issues in the town, what are contentious issues, what are things that people are excited about, things like that. We'd really be hoping to draw from the committee and town staff to get a better sense of what's going on here.
Which includes what's working well.
Yes.
It isn't just all about what's not working well, it's about what's working well too.
Yeah, or what people are excited about, or
right.
A recent success that people are want to see more of.
Yep.
And then we'd move into our public participation phase, and we'd hope to sit down early with the master plan committee and look through that toolbox that Judy just talked about and come up with a participation plan that really is appropriate for this context and for what you're trying to achieve here. Like Judy said, we hope to use a variety of outreach methods that could include social media, it could include online surveys, traditional outreach methods. And the strategy that we've sort of laid out in our proposal is responding to what you had in your RFP, but again, this is, we're open to changing this. It's not set in stone, but it would be a combination of sort of big public meetings and then interviews and focus groups. But again, if that's not what's going to work best, we could change that. Happy to do that. But for the approach that we put in our proposal, we had this initial public forum where we do a strengths, weaknesses, SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, which is a pretty established planning process. It's a way to analyze the community and serving as a kickoff event for the whole process. And we think it would be, could be a good idea to kind of incorporate a social component to that event. We've done it before. We've had a potluck supper or a apple cider and donuts or something like that, just sort of some informal thing initially to get people talking and maybe less formal, and maybe to encourage a more broad participation. That's worked well.
People
in other
will come for
communities.
food.
Yes, people always come for food. We'll probably have food at all these events.
Yeah, right.
Try to. The second public meeting would be a community scenario building workshop, and this is where we really would talk about different visions for the future. We like to ask residents what they think might happen versus what they ideally in a perfect world would want to happen. And so that really narrows the conversation on reality and results. And we think that's important, both for focusing the conversation and for down the road, the implementation phase, so we don't end up with these goals and objectives that realistically aren't going to happen in your community. And this is where we'd identify major points of agreement or disagreement, and then really work towards building consensus, so there's a common framework to be working towards with the master plan. And then concurrent with these first two public meetings, we would be doing interviews and focus groups with key stakeholders to gather sort of more detailed information on specific topic areas. And then the final public meeting would be held to synthesize all the information we gathered through the whole process. We'd be presenting our draft goals and objectives for each master plan element. And again, this is another opportunity to provide feedback. So if we didn't get it right, if we didn't come up with the right goals and objectives based on what we thought we heard, people can say, no, you got it wrong. Like, this is what we meant when we said that. And we'd really want to focus on priorities and trade-offs in that meeting so we can get, again, sort of framework for the master plan. Everything can't be top priority, so you really have to focus in on what's most important to the community.
And you may also find, when you get to that point in the process, that there are some issues that people are just all in agreement about, and some that you haven't really got a lot of agreement about yet, which is okay. Because what that does is it helps kind of focus or help to set some priorities about what are the things you need to work on more when you go into the next phase of the planning process. It's not failure if you have some issues that people simply don't agree on. It's not failure.
And then the final step for the visioning process would be to take everything we learned, prepare a final draft of the master plan goals and objectives that you could put right into your updated master plan, and then we'd be coming up with a strategy for the town to complete that master plan estimates. And I think our firm is really well positioned to come up with that strategy because we have such a wide experience with actually developing master plans for many communities.
We're also really good at being able to respond to a client that says, we're not going to be able to get an appropriation that is that high. How could we scale this down, or how could we break this up, or what could we do to bring the budget more closer to some other number? We're really good at being able to help think through that, and there are ways to do it. And not that I'm encouraging, treating planning lightly, but there are towns that simply can't go out and get $125,000 for a master plan, and so you have to be able to work with that community and not just say, well, that's what you have to do or it's not going to work. So we would tell you what we think, and then you tell us what you think, and we'll tell you what your options are. Okay?
So I'm going to turn it back over to Judy.
Yes, so this is like our summary slide, right? Why should you hire us? Our approach is, it's creative, we're very practical. We don't sort of narrow what people think they can do for their communities by trying to be, I guess, super realistic, but we are practical. There are things that are attainable, things that are not, things that are longer term, and we really try to sort of tailor the whole process and our approach to each town. I have worked at this point in my career in like 125 communities in Massachusetts, and I've never seen two that are the same. So yeah, you draw from your experience, but they're all different, and you got to tailor what you're doing to those towns. We understand our roles and responsibilities to our client. We have an obligation to be timely and prepared and not be know-it-alls, and be able to say in a meeting, gee, I don't have that information, we can get it for you, and to listen, to just be really good listeners. We value citizen participation. We don't just do this because it's part of like doing a plan. We really love working with citizens. I think, again, just because our company has this kind of unusual background, so rooted in community development, which is very hands-on with real people, that it's just part of the culture of our company, and all of us really care about it. We think citizen participation makes better plans, and we're not just saying that to be rote. Our background in community development does make us different. We really know a lot about what goes on inside city and town halls. When you get to your public facilities element, your economic development element, those aspects of the plan, the knowledge that we bring, I think really makes us stand out from other companies. We are experts in local government. It's what we're recognized for. We certainly understand the context in which your community functions, and we're a lot of fun to work with. We really are. And we encourage communities to have fun with their planning process. So that's our presentation, and we would love to field any questions that you may have for us. Do you want that off your face at this point?
That would be really good.
So that that's not just shining at you?
All right, Emily.
All right, so I've been asking all three firms the same 6 questions. So for all the things that we've just discussed with you, What is the most important element of a visioning process? It's the one thing you would pull out.
The outreach. I think the outreach process is key. And, you know, it's not something that the consultant coming in from Boston or wherever is going to be able to do for you. We'll help you design an outreach process. We'll help you design materials for it. But the best advice we can give you is your master plan committee needs to take ownership of the outreach. Your staff may need to help as well. We're not walking away, but it's just, I want you to just think about if you've got an envelope from Community Opportunities Group in Boston versus, you know, your neighbor in Milton, which one are you going to pay attention to? I think you're probably going to listen to your neighbors. The advice that we typically give our clients when it's time to start doing the outreach for the planning process is you go out and you find 5 people that you really like who think the way you do, and then you go out and you find 5 people you can't stand. And that's what you need to bring to your public meetings. And you need to do both. And it works. So I just think the outreach is really, it's really critical. I mean, you know, there's lots of other things that matter. We have to come prepared. The master plan committee can't be sort of set up to see some, you know, some slides they've never seen before and there are mistakes on them. I mean, there's a lot of prep that goes on, but the outreach is just key. And it gets the volunteers who are really going to be the ones bringing credibility to the process kind of out there early on. That's what I think. That's my experience.
Next question, what are your strengths in addressing that most important element? So in your case, what are your strengths in addressing the outreach?
Well, we've done so much of it. You know, we've done all kinds of stuff. People said, well, we need posters. We make beautiful posters. You know, we make sandwich board signs. I mean, we've done local cable TV shows, you know, before a major public. Sometimes communities have sort of the local government talk show. And we might go on with the chairman of the master plan committee and somebody from the planning board and just start talking up the process. So I think we're good coaches at it. And every community that has actually listened to us when we've said, you need to bring your enemies too, have come back and said later, it really made the difference. And it wasn't just that they had diversity of opinion in the room, it's that people who didn't like each other actually had a conversation. So there's a value to that. You know, following a big public meeting when there's been all this outreach is another place where I think our unobtrusive outreach can be very valuable, and it's that going on the street that we talked about. That may or may not be appropriate in your community, but it's something we're comfortable doing. Literally just going into the local coffee shop. We're about to start housing plans in a couple of very small communities out in central Mass that have like nothing, you know. And the issue out there is not how do you have a big public meeting, because that's not what's going to work there. It's where do people hang out? Where's the coffee shop? You know, which congregation has the most people in their church? Where do we need to go to find people and bring them into the process? That's, I think, where we play an invaluable role as outreach members, as well as engaging people in the process, because we'll go do that. We'll just walk down the street and say, hi, you know, we're here working with your town on a master plan. Would you like to talk? Or go into a coffee shop with a master plan committee member and start a conversation that can be overheard. And people will begin to draw into it. And we're very comfortable with those tools.
So when you start getting people into forums and they start chatting about things, it can sometimes get a lot broader than the original intent of the forum. How will you focus forums on the elements of 81D and of a master plan?
Well, actually, to be honest with you, I haven't seen them be all that broad. I think they tend to narrow if you just let people talk. People will start up here, you know, sort of 10,000 feet off the ground, but the more they talk and they hear each other, they begin to scope it down to the ground. And The other thing I think is very helpful in that process is that what some people think is a strength, other people think of as a weakness. And so there's always this big surprise in the room when people see an idea that shows up as a strength, a weakness, an opportunity, and a threat. And that brings about some discussion. How do you winnow this down? But, one of the things you can do in part of a big public event is you have a period of the meeting that is large group, and it might be up here, 10,000 feet off the ground. But then when you design your breakout sessions, you can use the elements of the master plan to organize some of those. So, your group mapping, if you do a group mapping exercise, which frankly, in my experience, people love, they've all got a set of instructions that are common, but then if you happen to be at the housing or economic development table, you're asked to think about a particular focus. If you're at the transportation table, you're asked to think about a particular focus. And I'll just give you an example to not be overly general with this. One of the activities that a lot of communities really seem to enjoy is this scenario where we'd say to them, we're coming to visit you, and we were going to be staying a whole week, and you were wondering how you're going to put up with us, and we've just told you that we're only going to be available for a day. What is it that we need to see in your community to be able to walk away and have a sort of comprehensive understanding of the town? And so they have a map, and they have markers, and they have to design a tour. And they have to make decisions about how much of it's in the car versus much of it's on foot. So that's sort of the umbrella instruction. But then so your particular interest is affordable housing. What is it that you want us to see? Your particular interest is in historic preservation. What is it that you want us to see? So they have to think about comprehensive issues, but then also the particular aspect of that element that matters. And it's remarkable to see the maps that citizen volunteers will produce out of that process. It's really very exciting.
And I think you partially answered this, but will you both be involved on a regular basis with the project?
We are the people who will be here. We are the people who will be doing the work back at the shop.
Right, we have another colleague, Kathleen Kelleher, who is a fantastic interviewer and leader of focus groups and doing public participation. She couldn't make it tonight, but she will also be involved, but it'll be the three of us.
She did a lot of the on-the-street work in Lawrence.
Since we're a little bit late getting started, we've had a very full agenda, not just tonight, but the entire spring and summer.
Right.
Will we still be able, under your schedule and in your opinion, get a final report before our May 2013 annual town meeting?
Yes. Yeah, I think it's doable. I mean, I would encourage you to make a decision soon and to hire us. You need to get going, but you know that. It's not infeasible to have it done by then. We just need to get going, and we need to get going after Labor Day.
And then the final question, at least for me, is why do you want to work with the town of Milton?
We love working with local governments. I'm not being sappy. This is what we do. We are local government consultants. On a rare occasion, we work for private sector clients, but that's not what we do. This is what we do. So why would we like to work in Milton? It's an area that, is a part of the state that we work in. We like local government planning. It's our focus. I don't know, you may have something else.
It's also an interesting community because you have so many different sides to it, at least from just doing a windshield survey and driving around. And you have the side next to Mattapan, which feels very different than the side that's next to Stoughton and the other part of the town. So it just has a lot of different feels, and I think that would be a very challenging environment to do the visioning, but we like a challenge. But I think that you have probably a lot of different opinions in this town that would have to come together.
Dedham was like that. Dedham has different faces. I'm not saying the towns are the same, but that concept of just very different faces depending upon what angle you're looking at into or out of the town was very much a part of the whole process there, and it makes it fun, frankly. It's challenging as a planner.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Oh, come on, guys. Do you have any questions for us?
5 of 10.
It is.
You've said it all.
Okay, sorry.
No, I've asked similar questions the last two groups as well. It seems to me that this visioning process leads to what you're gonna constitute for your master plan, what you're gonna
Don't.
aim.
It's a
with.
framework.
Yeah, what you're gonna, what you want the master plan to do for you.
Yep.
And I look at Milton and I see a town that's very small geographically, a lot of open space, vastly residential,
Yep.
very small little pittances of commercial areas, and it's been that way
Forever.
forever.
Yeah.
And as Newsweek says, number 2 in the nation.
Yeah. It's a pretty town.
So I kind of cut to the chase. What's to fix? You know, don't fix if it ain't broke. Can you see, or have you seen in the past, a visioning process like this get to a point where it's like, hey, you guys, I don't know that you need some big master plan. Maybe you need to tweak this here or there, but
You know, that's such a, Lincoln,
I mean,
which
what's the
knows
difference
it's
in Lincoln?
special. You know, they know they're special, and you had to be very conscious and throughout the public participation process in Lincoln to validate what they had done. And sometimes that's one of the best things that comes out of a process like this, is a sense of, we've done a lot of really good things well. The other thing that comes out of it is, we've been this way since Christ was born, but guess what? There are some threats out there that are different now than the conditions, the external factors that we were up against as a community 50 years ago. How do we need to be prepared to respond to those so that the good things we've done endure? But that's why I said, you know, it's not all just like what's wrong. It can be very much around what's right. Patting yourself on the back is a good thing to do, I think, as a town.
I can see that in Lincoln, but I'm not very familiar with Lincoln, other than I've probably driven through there once or twice. But I've got to believe that they maybe even have more areas that have potential for development. I mean,
They've bought so much open space, there's actually not that much
really,
left. But
Milton is, again, I don't know
Yeah.
the square mile area of
it's different. They're
Lincoln,
different towns,
but
yeah.
I got to believe it's bigger than Milton. I got to believe most
Oh, I
towns
think
are.
it is, yeah.
It's just is beyond what's right and wrong. There's very little room in Milton to do things.
Right, but I don't know the town as well as you do, but I suspect the external factors that the town has going on around it today are different from what they were 50 years ago. And that's why I'm saying that it may be people are really happy with a whole lot of things about your town. And so now the question is, and so how do we preserve what we have that we really love when these other things are going, these other dynamics are going on out there that are different?
Yep. I can see that. Preserve. Thank you.
We're going to make a determination at our next meeting, which is on August 23rd.
Okay, that's right before my birthday. So I'm going to look forward to getting a call from
Right
you.
before my birthday.
Okay.
So, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Yep,
Yes.
all right.
And we'll be in
Don't
touch.
forget your drive.
Yeah.
All
Yes.
right, I need-
Emily wants 5 minutes,
You can
even
time
though
me if
it's
you like.
now 10 o'clock.
I've actually got 1 minute before it's 10, but I will
I got
try
two,
and keep
but
it
go
as close as under 5. So, a couple of procedural things. One is, after we make our decision, we will need to call reference on our first choice, and then obviously if that works out.
Good night.
Thank you
Thanks.
very much.
Take care.
And then we have to sign a contract, and then we need to get going. Signing a contract sometimes takes a while, so if we're not making a decision tonight, which I gather we're not, A, try and remember what you heard tonight, and B, we definitely have to make the decision at our next meeting, because we're already behind from where we'd initially intended to be. I'm happy to stay and discuss tonight. I know other people aren't, so that's fine. On the master plan committee, as I said, I had written to Alex and said, look, we've got 27 names. I can see a couple of ways of doing it. One is for us to each choose 5, as you had just said, I think, while I was helping with the computer. One is for us to each choose 1, and with 5 of us, that would work. With each choosing 1, that gets a little bit difficult, because you're not sure if you've got the experience overlapping. Alex asked me to come up with a slate. I've done that. I'm comfortable going whichever way, because my slate is also my 5, so if we each choose 5, we're done there. Again, we should make that decision. If we're not making it tonight, we should make that at the next meeting. The only outstanding item on that is the Chamber of Commerce's liaison. They're not meeting until next Wednesday, so that person is outstanding. I now know the liaisons from all the other committees. So, and I know what precincts are.
That's on the information.
That's on the information that I gave you. So, so that's what I have on that.
All right, well, of course, the committee is not going to function until we have a consultant.
That is correct,
And
so could
we have told the consultant that we will make our determination at our next meeting, and I think that that's what we'll make, actually.
Then I would suggest that we should, as quickly as we can, given everybody's busy schedules, just keep in mind everything you heard tonight. I initially hoped if we hadn't run over time, that we would be able to make a decision tonight when it was still fresh in our minds.
Have we got any kind of cost structure from any of these people?
I think everyone's going to do
choose.
$25,000.
They've submitted
there's
a
a
price
lot of-
proposal. Yeah, it was in the RFP is 25,000.
That's-
The likelihood that they came
I
under is
recall
pretty
that.
slim.
I don't think
yeah.
I can't imagine.
But as a practical matter, the cost proposal came in a separately sealed envelope and gets opened after we make our choice. So, but again, the chances of them coming under 25.
Although it seems to me that if you have the two envelopes, and one is qualifications and the other is price, and you're going to, price is a factor in your decision, how can you possibly open the envelope on price after you've made your choice?
That is how the standard procedure is done.
Yeah.
As you pointed out when we did the RFP, since we put the price in there, it's not really part
Well,
of the
at
decision.
least we know everyone's going to be at $25,000.
Well, in the construction bidding process these days, you get points. So
Yes.
you could, before you open the envelope, you could select a person on points, but you could say
Yes.
the cost factor will weigh in at so many points, which could bring the second guy up to the top after you open it.
And that's the other way we could have
But
done
I think
that,
before
yes.
you announce for one of these folks here that you're choosing them, we should open envelopes and see how the cost
the
structure
thing is, they're not going to travel down here
for
to
this
our
one.
meeting to
No.
listen.
No.
We're going to call them after we,
So we can open the envelopes.
Actually,
right there.
we're not going to call them directly after, because the first thing we're going to do is we're going to call the references of our top choice.
On just.
Of course, the chances of them submitting a bad
On
reference
the people
is
that are gonna be on the steering committee, or
Yes.
master planning committee,
Yes,
don't take this as a criticism, but
not at all.
we always talk about credentials and stuff. In my mind, you wanna get a spectrum of the town.
Yes.
You don't wanna get 9 architects.
No, and my slate doesn't have,
I
I
want a
did
guy who
that.
works at the
Yes.
DPW if I feel as though he's gonna represent a segment of the town that hasn't. When I build a house and I've got 3 kids, I know I need 4 bedrooms. I don't need an architect to tell me that.
That's actually.
When I go to build the
yes.
house, I need an architect.
That is, I'm really, really, really glad you pulled that up, because that's one of the things I was thinking about as I looked at the names. As Alex pointed out, we got a lot of really strong candidates. And one of the things to remember is, A, there are multiple roles within this visioning process that we have now. So one is the master plan committee, but at least, I think, judging by what all 3 of our respondents said, they're gonna need facilitators, and if we get the type of response we want, they're gonna need more facilitators than just the
I
master
think
plan.
actually
So
listening
that's
to
part of it.
you're right.
Yeah.
I mean, it is, that is a factor.
The
Yeah, I
other
mean,
thing
if-
is,
if
we've
my
got,
point
we've got,
is-
but wait, we've
Yeah.
also got the stakeholder interviews. And some of the people on that list would be very appropriate to be interviewed either as the stakeholders or within certain focus groups. So, there's that. The other thing is, some of the people on this list would be excellent in the visioning process. I've got 1 more minute. And some of the people would be excellent if this committee determines that they do want to
How
go
can
on
you
to a full
possibly
master
say that?
plan. Because I can see it's not quite on the one. So it may be that some of the people we choose for the master plan committee now, which is a 1-year appointment, if we do as a board decide to go on to the next step, the choosing the master plan committee for the next step, we may want to tap some of the skills of the other people. But you're absolutely right. We do not want to 9 of any one
I can
thing.
summarize my point.
Yes.
If I've got 2 engineers and 3 architects and a lawyer and a doctor over here, and this guy manages the deli counter at the Stop and Shop, in my mind, you should take somebody like that. I
Yes.
mean, to say that, oh, these have people have more experience, but you're alienating just what we're trying to
We're not
accomplish here.
going to alienate anyone.
People are going to come to these
Yes.
meetings and say, oh, they were architects. They don't want to listen to me.
I agree with you. I agree with you.
All right,
We should probably have a motion
Wait,
to adjourn.
for me.
I am moving to adjourn.
We're adjourned.